We're live. Hey, what's up, guys? James here. I give some Witch on the Holy Night. Or Mahoyo, if you want to call it that. So, we're streaming a little bit on Thursday just because there's nothing happening in other games. So, let's get some progress in this game. So, I wanted to just continue as well. So, I'm really enjoying it so far. So, last time on Saturday, what we got up to? We ran into the confrontation with Aoko and Sojuro because Sojuro witnessed the scene of Aoko fighting a doll. It was a mechanical doll. That's right. So he witnessed magic, which he should not have as a regular citizen, and as not magic. Magecraft, sorry, because there's actually a difference between magic and magecraft. So he witnessed magecraft. So Aoko is basically had to pursue him to eliminate him because witnesses cannot live, whatever, that kind of crap. The whole confrontation happened and got gate crashed by wizard, or whatever that is fighting against Aoko with his doll. So the part's over, and all's fine and dead. What's up, Mousy Mouse? How you doing? Yeah, so that's part's all done now that they've gotten out of the mirror house. And Aoko's like, okay, I'll let you go for tonight. Then comes Alice and she's like, oh, hey, this is your novel day? Usually no, but I'm playing Mitchell, I'm playing Mahoyo because I got nothing else to do, so I want to continue this. So let's continue off where we were last time. We're about to confront Alice now. The melody stirred an emotion like nostalgia within them. Something once familiar but now lost to this world. They believed beyond a shadow of a doubt that it would play for all eternity. From opening stanza to final coda, there was a mysterious siren song, merry yet longing, that heralded a return from dreams to reality. Night shook. A song was spun. Their lost paradise was unearthed. Abandoned dreams. Forsaken idols. They all responded to the cry of the blue cat. The name of that bell was Diddle Diddle, good of the night. Fables made possible. Marvels made real. By the magecraft of Alice Kuonji, more magical than magic itself.
I
Alice sat perched atop the clock tower, like a black bird of ill omen. She smoothed the ruffles of her skirt as if she was preening.
Alice.
There was tension in Aoko's voice as she lifted her head. The calm atmosphere for a moment prior had long since been shooed away by Alice's gaze. Sojuro searched his hazy memory. He could not clearly make out her face at this distance, but he was sure he had seen her around town a number of times. When eluded him, as the tension in the air kept him from connecting all the dots.
驚いた。随分と仲間思いになったのね、アリス。今夜は私に任せるんじゃなかったっけ？
Are you ready, Ipan? Aoko readied her guard and took half a step forward, unconsciously. From an objective standpoint, it looked It almost looked as though she were protecting the figure beside her. Alice's silence grew even heavier. Her eyes fixed on the ground below her were devoid of emotion. An indescribable sense of dread and pressure laid claim over the plaza. If he strained his ears, he could make out the faint ringing of a bell echoing in the distance. The rippling sound wave seemed, unbelievably, to be emanating from under the ground.
なあ、青崎、あの子。
黙ってて。
Rojiro stepped back, trying to stay out of the way. It was as though he'd been told to go to hell, for the crime of asking if the girl was Aoko's friend.
そうね。仲間思いに当てはまるかは微妙だけど、良くない予感がしたから様子を見に来ただけ。別にあなたの仕事を疑ったわけじゃないわ。
それはどうも。どうせならもう少し早くその良くない予感とやらに気づいてほしかったけど。でもま、ご覧の通り自己解決したわ。夜も遅いし、さっさと帰っていいわよアリス。私の仕事っぷりを疑うわけじゃないんでしょ。
It's locked on one another. Alice's stare was uncomfortably cold. Lucas was bold, daring Alice to air her complaints.
いえ、気が変わったわ。せっかくだし二人で帰りましょう。その方があなたらしいわ。帰りしな、人形の話でも聞かせてちょうだい。
So she knows about our fight with the puppet, alright.
らしいって何よらしいって。いいから帰れ帰れ、ぐうたらアリス。部屋に閉じこもって役に立たないムクドリでも作ってろっての。
A disappointed sigh escaped Alice's delicate lips. It seemed that the black-clad girl was more astonished than angry.
青子、口にしたくないけど、本気？
Quietly, Alice questioned her roommate of nearly 2 years.
呆れた。二人で秘密を守ると言ったのに。まだ半端にそっち側なの？それとも情でも移った？
別に情っていうより私の気分。だいたい方針なんてその場その場で変わるもんでしょ。気分ならなおさらよ。そっちこそ一度した約束は絶対守るなんて時代遅れなんじゃない？
Proverbial knives were out now. Quarter was given, taken. Sadly, their partnership was one of convenience. It had not reached the level of mutual understanding. The version of friendship was both delicate and unique. A conflict of opinion arose. Each would refuse to budge until the other crumbled. Each was concerned for the other's plight, and at least for now, that was how they liked it.
そうね。今の暴言はあなたらしいとは思うけど。
Once again, she let out a sigh, even larger than the one before.
言い争いは後にしましょう。そこの彼をいなかったことにするのは私だけで十分だし。
Finally, she struck straight to the point. As if making to move a chess piece, Alice lifted her slender finger. It's a fork! Even this simple action seemed mysterious to Sojiro, the same boy who had been hunted by his classmate Aoko Aosaki, born witness to an automaton. Aoko's violence and animated doll, though perhaps far beyond the realm of logic. These things were derived from reality. Surprised as he had been, there was no need to think of them as total mysteries. However, the thing appeared out of thin air from a seemingly unrelated gesture, yet no word for it besides mysterious. Sojiro stood motionless, captivated by this stage performer's magic trick, as the girl's single-finger magecraft turned into an attack directed at him. Blue light flew from the side to repel it, annihilating it without a trace.
やば。
Aoko immediately regretted her reflexive shot.
どういうこと？約束を曲げただけじゃなく、ルールまで破るつもり？
Already chilled midwinter air plunged below freezing. Alice looked calm and collected on the outside, but in reality she was sometimes even more hot-blooded than Aoko. This was especially true when it concerned her familiars. Accidentally breaking one would often result in a week of silent treatment. But against someone who maliciously destroyed the things, Alice was prone to retaliate without warning.
あっちゃー。いつかやるとは思ったけど、ついに激鱗に触れちゃったか。
She destroyed it. Aoko sighed at herself. Even she was exasperated by her own stupidity, yet she couldn't help but feel a pang of relief. She did not intend to make any excuses, and she had no regrets. She had broken the rules, then so had Alice.
青子。
なんていうか。
If anything, this took a load off her mind. After all, now there was no going back. Aoko never intended to break her own rules. If there was anything for Aoko to regret, it was putting too little power into her shot.
私的に今夜こいつに死なれるのは困るのよ。なんで日を改めて殺しに来てくれないアリス。いいでしょ？たった1日ぐらい。
To Aoko, it was simply natural to take on a pro bono case in defense of an innocent suspect.
それは市場？
悪い？一宿一般の恩義って割と大事にしてるの、私。
私との協定より。
ええ、時と場合によっては。
Sojiro's human rights had not yet entered the argument. The girls were busy pouring oil on each other's flames. The girl clad in black was the first to move, to erupt.
そう。よくわかったわ、青子。私は彼をここで殺す。あなたは彼をここだけ生かす。つまり私と戦うということでいい？
そんなのいいわけないじゃない。
Aoko bit back to retort. She was very familiar with Alice's magecraft, and knew painfully well how many mystics are hidden in Alice's tiny body. But like even after all this banter, the answer is to recruit Sojiro to live at their place so their secret will be leaked. I'm pretty sure that's what's gonna happen. It's just a question of how is Sojiro gonna convince Alice now? Odds of victory were essentially non-existent. Once the first shot had been fired, Alice Kuonji was without mercy. Facing a roommate or a friend, the most beloved family member or a stranger. As Alice began to fight as a witch, she became a heartless, unflappable monster. Flappable, that's a word. Aoko advanced another half step forward, as if to encourage herself. It was too late to back down now. The situation was no longer a trivial quarrel over a witness. The bedrock of their so-called friendship had nothing to do with their individual abilities, and everything to do with being equals in will. That's why, in order to stay true to herself, Aoko had no room for compromise or deception.
もちろんあんたを殺すことになってもそこのバカは生かしきるわ。それに
Magic circuits howled as they kicked into gear. Her body, which had mostly been dormant during the battle with the puppet, ignited, preparing to demonstrate its true worth.
それにどの道最後には殺し合う仲でしょ、私たち。
Courage overpowered any fear she had for her opponent. Turning her body, the magic circuits, to become like the barrel of a gun, Aoko fired a magic bullet. It was an exceedingly basic magecraft formula. There was no nature interference, no creating of wind, parting of water, or hastening of decay. There was simply a process of converting the imaginary activity known as magical energy into something real before releasing it as heat. Thus Aoko's destructive power was equal to her supply of magical energy. Magical bullets she had used against Sojo, among the most basic single-action magecraft, did not require an incantation. Her present ability, Aoko's main mode of attack, her magic bullet, could be fired at 3 levels of power. These were at the 2nd level. This required a double-action magecraft, a casting through activation of her crest combined with a simplified incantation. Without blinking, was dispersed the shot that Aoko had mustered all of her spirit to fire. Aoko tutted in frustration. A swift sneak attack that used a simplified incantation would not be enough to break Alice's guard.
相変わらずお堅いこと。そのから一段と独りよがりになってるんじゃない？
Aoko provoked Alice in order to disguise her own lack of composure. Somehow Alice seemed delighted by Aoko's bravado.
売り言葉に買い言葉というやつね。こういう勢いだけのきっかけは初めてだけど驚いたわ。こんなくだらない理由でもその気になるものなのね、人間って。
Alice giggled. Smiling with heartfelt amazement, Alice gestured her left hand toward the earth. Stab, 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 stab. Countless utensils shot out from underneath the cobblestones paving the plaza.
しずきくん、後ろに飛んで。
He grabbed his hand as she shouted, jumping backward before he even had a chance to respond. As if they had wills of their own, the utensils had suddenly appeared from the ground and gave chase. As the barrier of spears grew around them, Aoko and Sojo put some distance between themselves and the clock tower.
これで終わり？
Just under 30 feet stood between them and Alice. Lethal weapons that had crumbled the stone beneath them fell short of what Aoko had anticipated. They now encircled the clock tower, making the scene look like the burning of a witch at the stake.
普通逆じゃない。ここは私たちを逃がさないよう槍で周りを囲むものでしょ。
The path behind them was safe. If they wanted, they could try to make a break for the main gate escape.
いいのアリス。悪いけど逃げられるなら逃げるわよ。私。
Sojo's expression. You could just make it back to town. It'd be Aoko's win. All she wanted to do was let Sojo get away for the night. So if she could get him back to the city, it would be, for the most part, mission accomplished.
Huh?
So she had thought. Without even offering a glance at her targets below, Alice carefully and lovingly pulled out a bottle from her pocket.
緑のフラスコ？あれって確か。やば！とにかくファイヤー！
Shot was deflected with ease. The line was Aoko's earlier bravado. It was only natural. Aoko had indeed grown as a mage. Over the last 2 years of study, her studies had progressed well, and she had more or less gotten a grasp of her roommate's tendencies and abilities. This had made her conceited enough to believe that, under favorable circumstances, she'd be able to show Alice a thing or two in a fight. Sun corked the magic bottle. A gentle breeze caressed her cheek. Diddle Diddle fled as a new player stepped onto the stage. From where would it enter? The sound of footsteps, a nostalgic parade, approached. powered the carnival. What emerged was a miracle that Aoko Awazaki, an apprentice mage, had never witnessed. Dead came to life. The inanimate awakened. The woods were enveloped by the mists. Fire-breathing lizards lurked in the swamps. Puppets made merry at night. Squangy's slender fingers had transfigured the entirety of the park, as if gently stroking the back of an elderly cat.
いいわ。ごっこ遊びをしましょう。青子。
That's where that line's coming from. One night, the wasteland of dashed hopes and dreams was restored to its former glory. It was an immortal monster ready to devour reality. A dark fairy tale that, if unleashed, would never let its prey escape.
逃げられるものなら逃げてみせて。どこまで行けるかわからないけど、この夜を越えることができたのなら、あなたの勝ちにしてあげる。
Declaration marked the start of a desperate battle. Witch in Black laughed at a friend. Musical mirth filled with affection, madness, and innocent delight. Faded glory returned to Kitsyland. Neon glow of innumerable lights illuminated the night. Speakers filled the air with the sound of vinyl music. Merry-go-rounds, small and large, round and round. All in all, made for a mind-bending spectacle. It was certainly possible to power the facilities by transmuting magical energy into electricity via alchemy. That said, simply supplying the park with electricity would not have brought back to life that which was broken. The young woman did this not by mixing chemicals into a compound, but by melting down divine providence into a witch's brew.
まずいわね。アリスのプロイは何個か見てきたけど、今回のは桁が違う。セット。
Stifling her anxiety, Aoko fired up the crest on her right arm. If magic circuits were a mage's engine, then the crest was software that assisted their magecraft. For the fledgling mage Aoko, this was a trump card. All she had to do was supply magical energy to her crest-based formula. It might not have been the strongest magecraft, but it was hers, that she was a successor of the Awazaki lineage.
講師2層、直流数も。
The pattern of her crest shifted to execute the formula, which then connected to her magic circuits. The process resembled trains changing rails, a puzzle involving dozens of circuits. She constructed it as swiftly as possible without sacrificing the quality of its construction. Instant magecraft casts without an incantation would not be enough to reach Alice Kuanji. Aoko engaged the strength of Alice's defense with her initial shots. She'll dial up the power 5 times the next time, driving 20 tons of force into her target. Set the protection of a thick, hanging fog and a dense barrier around her. This attack being more than enough to pierce through both. If Aoko struck home, it could cave in Alice's chest and end the fight. At worst, it would at least knock Alice down from her position atop the clock tower.
そろそろいいかな。
As always, there was one guy who spoiled the deadly tension, pulling Aoko out of killer mode. Sojiro had been looking back and forth between Aoko and Alice in confusion.
それでどういう話になったんだ？
He said it like he might ask for directions at the train station. This guy doesn't realize he's about to be killed. Normally she would have lashed out in response, but his deadly serious tone shocked rather than angered her.
信じられない。慣れてきた、私。
Aoko swallowed back a sigh and returned her focus to activating her crest.
交渉は決裂。ちょっと怒らせすぎた。あの子から見れば、まあいい機会だし、遊園地ごと私を亡き者にしようって腹ね。
Sojiro tilted his head, as if begging for a simple explanation.
私割とあの子に恨まれてるから。捕まったが最後どんな風に殺されるか想像すらできないわ。要するにあんたも私もあの子をどうにかしないと生きて帰れないってことよ。
そんなとばっちりだ。
You guys are about to fight, can at least go to the merry-go-round, Sojiro.
まあそういうことになるかもね。
As Sojiro protested in a tone wholly inappropriate to the situation, Aoko let another blast rip from her right arm. She was not aiming at Sojiro though. A little earlier in the day, Aoko would have been happy to do exactly that, but now her attention was focused on the girl back atop the clock tower. Ako's mind struggled to catch up to her astonishment. She had to fight the strongest, fastest magic bullet she had the ability to conjure, and Alice blocked it. That much was to be expected, but Alice set her mind to defending herself. Such an attack was child's play. It just happened. Something Aoko had never seen before leapt into Alice's defense. A team of horses? Plague of locusts? This existed in the real world, like what Aoko had just witnessed. Creatures could not form like a spontaneous cloud of fog and then dissipate just as quickly into the night sky. The fucking teddy bear. Impossible things moved in impossible ways. Alice was not even supplying them with any power source. These things never needed power in the first place. Those broken and discarded things did not follow the rules of mankind. This was an invasion of fairy tales. Compared to them, the automaton looked merciful. Anonymous puppets were products of magecraft, but even then they behaved as puppets should. These newly animated things, however, were nothing of the sort. Empty vessels became living creatures. Dummies warped into malformed beings. There was a fog so dense with magical energy, it visibly spread to all corners of the park. They led a monstrous welcoming party that easily numbered over 1,000. Spurred on by the shuddering sensation running down her spine, Aoko fired a barrage of single-action magic bullets. Her impulsive attack scattered futilely. The knights of the merry-go-round soared into the sky. Green, fire-breathing lizards flocked. The bakeries opened their doors once again, and human-sized loaves of fresh bread marched from their ovens as platoons of newly baked soldiers.
Aozaki, 後ろ!
Aoko and Sojiro were completely surrounded. The Ferris wheel creaked as it gently turned. A rickety train car raced about the roller coaster tracks with Kitsy, tears streaming down its face abroad. It was a grossly twisted fantasy. The girl in black reigned over the insanity-fueled park. Screwed. Aoko was transfixed by the scene unfolding around her. She realized what was happening.
そうだ、これは。
Alice had once told her of monstrous familiars. Among them were 3 of particular notoriety. She recalled being capable of something similar to this. Boarding Max? And it was called
プロイキッシャー、フラットスナーク。
青崎、だから後ろ!
Struck by Aoko's bullets, creatures exploded into splinters. It was clear Aoko's shots were becoming more powerful. It was also the case that these beings were less robust than your average automaton.
しずきくん、こっち。
Aoko turned away from the clock tower, grabbed his hand, and began to run.
青崎!
ごめん、これ無理。逃げるわよ。
逃げるってどこに?
どこって、とにかく行けるところまで。
Without it as though trying to persuade herself as she valiantly cleared a path. Because magic bullets flew like a scream. Blowing away the creatures that blocked, simply gathered around their path. She made a hole for them to escape through. Did you catch up to the previous story, or are you jumping in fresh? Bullets exploded like blue fireworks. Aoko and Sojo ran down the bumpy brick road. Their bond, forged in the heat of battle, went far beyond mutual convenience. They headed for the park's exit at full speed, exchanging a word or a look. This only extended as far as the park border, so they would be safe as long as they made it outside. But speaking in pure numbers, the difference in strength was 2 versus an army. Look at the breadmen! 1 versus an army. Soldier was hardly useful in this situation, and manpower wasn't really the issue here, since they were facing puppets.
さっきの大丈夫？上からこうでっかいハサミが落ちてきたけど。
Quick out as she blasted away the monsters that stood in her path. There was no time to stop for breath, or even to look back.
なんとかギリギリ。
Oh, a sable unit. It was all the sabers. There's about to be a new one to join the party too. As Soldier pursued, his voice too had naturally become shrill. 5 minutes earlier. They had broken out of the siege at the plaza surprisingly fast. It seemed that the residents' awakening differed case by case, with larger creatures taking additional time.
ラッキー、朝に弱いタイプばっかと見た。
Aoko joked as she mowed down the small fire that popped up. But then, without warning, something outrageous extended its way down from above them. It's the claws of the 60-foot lobster adorning the roof of a seafood restaurant. Oh no! My nemesis. Its pincers were like a guillotine. Aoko and Sojo cut across the front of the restaurant. The Red King pressed in at a tremendous speed, keen on splitting them each in 2.
しずきくん、ユータン、こっちはダメ。
The gate was just on the other side of the restaurant. They had to take the long way around in order to lose the giant lobster snapping at their heels. Heading along their detour had been a horde of monsters, too many to count.
なんとかギリギリ。
Dojiro called out in response, recalling just how narrowly he had avoided his head being severed clean from his body.
手前。うわ、なんだあれ。焼きたてか。
そうみたいね。要するに下級兵士よ。
Altered a sprint, set a crest into full operation.
距離7、6、5メートル。あの程度ならスナップだけで事足りる。
Gliding along the brick path, she brandished her right arm. She loosed a shower of magic bullets. Snap was a single action spell that favored rate over fire power, and it mowed down the monsters with satisfying pops.
青崎そっちも。
了解。
Explosions bloomed along the lamp-lit promenade. Aoko's curtain of fire fanned out. It was a marvelous star mine of fireworks show. Toy bread men turned into charcoal.
いける。数でこそ押されてるけど、この状態が続くなら逃げ切れる。しずきくん、そっちは。
いない、空いてる。ここからなら入り口の東側に出られるはずだ。
The magical barrage that will leave an average spellcaster blue in the face. Novice mage broke through the siege. Meanwhile, Single Bird keenly watched everything unfold. Bird! Whenever the blue bird descended into its master's field of vision, it made its high-pitched call. The girl listened expressionlessly to the report.
構わないわ。予想通りよ。撃つこと、壊すことしか脳がなくても、青子の魔力の使い方は波じゃないから。急増の使い魔じゃ、まだ相手にはならないでしょう。
It flapped its wings as it tweeted in response. So it was criticizing Alice for complimenting Aoko. Perhaps it was jealous of Aoko for being praised by Alice. Alice could barely make sense of its chirping. Awazaki was a novice mage. Until just 2 years ago, she had grown up with no background in magecraft. Compared to Alice, who was raised as a witch from birth, Aoko possessed far less talent and experience. Starting to understand Alice's skills in FGO. It looks like it's animating shit, yeah. Simply no comparison to be made. In a contest of skills in magecraft, 10 times out of 10 Alice would be declared the victor. But the narrative changed when it came to a battle for life or death. Alice Konji was not the type of mage suited to combat, while Aoko Awazaki on the other hand was built for it. In a contest that pitted magical energy against magical energy, even Alice would concede that Aoko had the upper hand. Aoko's manipulation of magical energy was extraordinary. The scale of her magic circuits was smaller than that of Alice, with their rotational speed, durability, and output quality, not to mention efficiency, otherworldly. It was Aoko Awazaki's hallmark. Though she had many failings when handling sophisticated formula, in just 2 years of practice, Aoko had surpassed Alice in simple formula that merely required an energy input. She also had a genius's instincts and adaptability. Aoko was not particularly proficient at executing magecraft. She was terrifyingly fast. If she had been born outside the Awazaki clan, she would have doubtless risen to fame as a competitive sharpshooter.
でも、残念ね。
In a straight shootout, Alice did not stand a chance. Alice Konji had never bothered to learn primitive magecraft like magic bullets in the first place. She was a classic puppeteer. Familiars served as her arms and legs to carry out all the particulars of a battle.
制限時間には気づいているわよね、青子。魔力はいくらでも貸してあげるけど、あなたの魔弾はあと半時で値崩れするわ。
Chirping as if in agreement, Robin took flight. It had been nearly 10 minutes since Alice had made the amusement park her dominion. To what would the green fog give birth next? Aoko and Sojiro, still running about, would soon come to understand the gravity of this situation. It makes it sound like she's lending it Aoko magic power? I get it.
しずきくん、正門ってこっち？
ああ、その店を曲がれば出口だ。
Running non-stop at full speed had them at the limits. Their breath ragged, the duo rounded a corner at breakneck pace. Amusement park though it was, this was still the infamous Kitsyland. It had taken a high school student 20 minutes to sprint the entire circumference of the park. And though they were now intimately familiar with the park's geography, changing beyond recognition. The transformation was not limited to the park's residents either.
青崎、
何を？
言いたくないんだけど、この遊園地広くなってないか。
Was. Their problem wasn't as mundane as mistaking the location of the exits, nor the strange terrain. The park was being twisting in upon itself. Even as they ran, its structure was expanding and growing, like that of a living creature. Soon the pair noticed that the mob encircling them had grown even stronger. Then trusting it back to Sojiro, Aoko summoned all of her effort just to keep from winning. Blamed Sojiro for cowering in shock. For Aoko to do the same, she bore responsibility for causing and then dragging him into this mess. She could not afford to succumb to panic.
大丈夫。落ち着け私。遊園地の果てはある。遠いけど。鉄柵はちゃんと見える。フラットスナークだって制限なしってわけじゃない。 外に逃げるって選択は正しいはず。現状外までは目算で1キロぐらいだけど。
But till now they had been too concerned with simply running. Their breathing had become labored. If they had to run another mile without rest, they'd end up collapsing along the way.
青崎、体大丈夫か？
え？
But from behind pulled Aoko back to reality.
大丈夫だけど、ちょっと一息入れたいわね。
賛成。ここから休みなしで外周まで走るのはやめた方がいい。
驚いた。しずきくんも外まで走ろう派とは。
He let slip a giggle. Far from debilitated by panic, her comrade in arms had been analyzing the situation and formulating an escape plan.
ちょっとだけ建物に逃げ込むのは。
気は進まないけど、それしかないわね。
Redmen had them completely surrounded. Perhaps this might have been a problem for an average person. For Aoko breaking through their formation to get to the building would be a cinch. It sure was.
問題はどんな店を選ぶかってこと。
He considered the characteristics of the transforming park. Pose a danger, and what was safe. The most important factor was not the strength or the complexity of the building.
そうだ。選ぶならあの単純さで正しいはず。しずきくん、あっち。
Routing the monsters, Aoko hopped behind the counter, soon followed by Soldier.
カウンターに隠れてて。
She was in a western shootout. Aoko squared off against the monsters, using the counter as a cover.
ビンゴ。ここならスナーク化しないんだ。
After assessing the current state of the enemy, Aoko sat down under the counter.
あいつらは？
店の周りで地団打踏んでるわ。理由があってね。あいつらはここには入ってこられないのよ。
Aoko gave the perplexed soldier a grin. I took the moment to catch her breath. She heaved a heavy sigh of relief and fatigue.
とりあえずコーヒーブレイクね。ここは遊園地の中でも遊びのない場所だから、あいつらにとっては鬼門なのよ。レジスターの調理器具も最近のものだし、擬人化されたマスコットもないし、スナーク化するにはちょい文明犬すぎるってこと。
スナーク？
あいつらの名前よ。つけたのは私じゃなくてアリスなのかしらね。あの子の性格的にちょっと想像できないけど、まあとにかくそういう名前。
Perhaps now at ease from knowing they were safe, Soldier seemed enthralled by an inner explanation. Aoko could not help but chuckle as Soldier nodded sagely. It was certain that he had no idea what she was talking about. It sort of irritated her, but this time she was grateful for the warmth of his strange sobriety.
それはともかく調子良さそうだな、青崎。
Mistaking her smile for composure, Soldier broke into a smile himself. It's just another link in the chain of misunderstandings. But there was no need to readdress it.
あれ？あなたから見てもわかる？私のマダンの威力が上がっているの。
そりゃミラーハウスで散々追いかけ回されたからな。あの時と同じ動作なのに物騒さが増していれば嫌でもわかる。でもいいのか？確か数に限りがあるとか言ってただろう。もう随分撃っちまったけど20、30じゃ効かないぞ。
あんた時々あれよね。
ん？
Opinion of him improved, just a little bit.
なんでもない。私のマダンの威力が上がっているのは単純に魔力の濃度の問題。さっきから霧がかかってるでしょ？あれ全部魔力なのよ。弾を撃つための燃料と思って。
That's why Alice was saying she's lending Aoko magic. Okay. Magical energy was divided into two broad categories. First was odd, produced inside a mage's body. Second was mana, which filled the atmosphere. At the moment, the music park had turned into a fairy tale land, flowing in mana. That meant nothing to the average person. To a mage, it was a paradise where spells could be cast as much as one pleased.
じゃあ残り魔力とやらは気にしなくていいのか。注意すべきは怪我と体力だけ。
まあ 個人的な責任においてはその限りね。
Sojiro breathed a sigh of relief. From Sojiro's perspective, more so than the monsters she mowed down, Aoko was the biggest bully on the playground. He had been concerned about what would happen should her magical energy be exhausted, but luckily for him, she was far from surrendering her crown.
頼りにしてくれるのは嬉しいけど、ぬか喜びよ。あんな雑魚たち、ただ動いているだけのガラクタなんだから。スナーク本体は当然として、アリスが他の童話の怪物を出してきたら、私じゃどうにもならない。
他の童話の怪物。遊園地をこんな風に変えたやつ以外にまだいるのか？
そう。プロイキッシャーって名付けられた、私たちでさえ目を背けたくなる反則。不可能な夢物語をも再現する時代に取り残されたデタラメよ。
Sojiro's expression seemed to be calling out the hypocrisy.
あのね、私たちはちゃんと現代に寄り添った魔術師よ。できないこともあるし、当たり前のことだけど、近代兵器にはかなわない。20世紀、まあ、いろんな戦争の後押しで、兵器の進化は私たちを超えちゃったから。けど、あの子のは違う。どんなに人間の技術が進歩しようと関係ないって怪物なの。例えば、あのブレッドマンいるでしょ。あいつには自動拳銃とか効かないわよ。多分、意味が分かっていないから。
It doesn't make sense logically? What? Not that this makes sense logically. Aoko casually gestured outside, past the counter.
アリスの使い魔は、全てが空想によってこねられた神秘なの。前提からしてありえないことだから、通常の物理法則と折り合いが悪い。空想と現実は両立しないっていう、ごく当たり前の理由でね。
なるほど。ブレッドマンってのはあの動く焼きたてパンのことなんだな。
Sojiro seemed to have ignored the majority of Aoko's explanation, and only reacted to the part that caught his curiosity.
話を戻すけど、あいつらと近代兵器の相性は最悪。ロケット弾でも効果はないわ。意思の疎通、秩序の共有ができてないから。プロイキッシャーにとって彼らの世界には存在しないもの、意味がわからないものは触れることなく無賛する。
That also means they can't interact with anything that they don't understand. Is that it?
彼らに通じるのは同じ神秘を帯びた魔力だけっていうデタラメぶりよ。もう完全に概念空間っていうか、概念宇宙っていうか。要するに、あいつらは伝承防御っていう特別なルールを持っていて、単純に強い力、強い魔術じゃ効果は薄いの。元になった童話にちなんだ欠点をつかないと倒せない。ギリシャ神話のアキレスあたり分かりやすい例えなんだけど、知ってる？
Sojiro shook his head.
そう。無事帰れたら飛び丸あたりに教えてもらって。定番だけどいい話よ、あれ。
Sojiro was feeling pretty lost, but he did his best to grasp the situation. He thought that ploy kickshaws were scary enough to chase Aoko and the puppet from before out of the house barefoot. Certainly the scene before them was the stuff of nightmares. Sojiro had a different way of thinking.
やっぱり青崎の方が怖くないか？
あんた死ぬの？
Sojiro waved in protest, silently pointing out that she had made his case for him.
あのね、今私たちを取り囲んでるのはおまけに過ぎないの。アリスにとって、あのブレッドマンもロブスターもソーセージ屋のミンチマシーンも、全部が全部、私が撃ってる魔弾より価値がない。いい？あの動くマスコットたちはね、ただのおまけなの。アリスが解放した童話の怪物の一呼吸みたいなものなのよ。
呼吸ってこれが？
私だって考えたくないわよ。でもそれが現状。たった一体の童話の怪物だけで私たちは手一杯。そういうわけだから、アリスがあと一体でも追加したら諦めて。
追加って、これに制限はないのか？
あの子が出し惜しみしなければ、まだ何体かストックはあるでしょうけど。まあ、 成立する条件はあるわね。例えば川がないと目を覚まさない怪物もいる。この遊園地、噴水はあるけど川はないでしょ。元になった童話縛りなの、あの子の使い魔は。
童話ってかけそばとか？
ここに川がないのは不幸中の幸いね。もしあったらもっと直接制圧に向いたやつが出てきてた。
Aoko continued, completely ignoring Sojiro.
話の続きだけど、アリスの魔術の基本はマザーグースって知らないか。イギリスの歌で遊び心に富んだメルヘンチックな内容よ。ただそっち系のプロイキッシャーは怖くないの。みんなそれなりになんとか魔術にも落とし込める範囲だから。
聞きたくないんだけど、そっち系じゃないのは？
マザーグースを下地にしたとある創作童話系。あの子のお母さんが好きでね。こっち系のはどいつもこいつも尋常じゃない。私たちから見ても勘弁してって言いたくなるわ。でこの遊園地を生き返らせたのはこっち系よ。多分フラットスナークってやつだと思う。私も聞き流していたから詳しくはわからないけど。
These other Mother Goose tales. Sojiro swallowed the discomfort, making its way up his throat. It really wanted her to explain things a little less vaguely, but something she had just said necessitated further investigation. Keep reading flat snark as flat shark. Fat shark.
待て青崎、あの子の話を聞き流したってなんで？
いや説明してもらったのは随分と前だし、あの頃はアリスの話あんまり信じられなかったのよね。私が素人だと思って大げさに自分の魔術を語ってくれてるな、舐められてるなとか。
Truth, if anyone hadn't taken the lesson seriously, it's Aoko. She would learn that lesson firsthand soon enough, but she experienced just how real Alice's monsters were. She'd also discover how heretical the Mind Stirrer witches truly were in the world of Magecraft.
その聞き流した内容は？
何でも強力な結界を張るプロイだって。アリスが受け継いだプロイは山ほどあるけど、その中でもえりすぐりの一つよ。捨てられたもの、忘れられたものを童話的に蘇らせるやつで、今まで誰も破ったことがないとか。それでついたあだ名が触れられぬもの。
フラットスナークじゃないのか？
それもあだ名。とにかく正体がわからないやつばっかりなんで、一つの個体に複数の名前が付けられるの。フラットスナークはその中でも正体不明さはトップランクのデタラメぶりよ。あなたルイス・キャロルのスナーク狩りって本知ってる？
いや、そもそもルイス・キャロルというのは。
そっからか。ドジスン教授はそうね、特殊性癖を持った妄想紳士ってとこ。まあこっちは別にどうでもいいか。人によっては時間の無駄だろうし。今重要なのは彼が残した著作の方。スナーク狩りはね、スナークって呼ばれる正体不明の怪物を捕まえようと奔走する冒険家たちの話なの。キャロルらしい皮肉ばっちり、支離滅裂、意味不明、結末不在の本当に困った本で、一行は島で苦しみつつ最終的にはスナークを見つけるものの、見つけたベイカーは唐突に姿を消して終わってしまう。よくわからないもの探しに奔走する人間の風刺なんだけど、この遊園地において誰がベイカーで何がスナークかは言うまでもないでしょ。
So, Sojiro and Aoko are the baker. The snark is what they're chasing? It what's chasing them? Is that it? I don't know. What? We're out visibly trying to find something they don't understand. It comes to the pockets. The party does ultimately find the snark on the island after much hardship, until the protagonist found the baker suddenly disappearing. Aoko elected not to share this, but Flat Snark had other popular names as well. The Enigmatic Island, 5-dimensional plane. These names were not given to it by Alice, but rather muttered by mages whom the Mindsters defeated. Mathematics, NOOOOO is a term used in graph theory to refer to contradictory and impossible planar graphs. A plane proven to be unable to exist in this world was given the name apt for an ill-fated existence paradoxical in nature. The fairy tale monster ascribed this name was said to hold no form discoverable by man. Of course, it declined to mention something else. Perhaps NOOOOO was a fairy tale monster that could grow. It would hide somewhere in the amusement park, continuously exhaling magical energy until the park completely transformed into a fantasy land.
脅かしてもしょうがないし。
何か言ったか？
別に。簡単に言って、童話世界の再生がフラットスナークの力なの。この遊園地との相性は抜群でしょうね。何しろ元々が童話を元にした遊び場だから。
If this had been a business district, for example, that NOOOOO would have posed far less of a threat. At most, its power would be limited to projecting the shadow of a dinosaur onto a building's window panes.
あ、だからここは安全だって。ん
Sojiro realized that something was wrong when he noticed the glutinous liquid dripping onto his back. Up to the ceiling. Their eyes met. Before he had a chance to think, Sojiro hopped up from the floor.
青崎外だ!
Taking the initiative, he jumped out from behind the counter.
バカ、何して!
Trying to stop her from committing an act of suicide, she also came to her feet. Immediately, she noticed something come to life overhead.
やばっ!
Gargantuan mouth clamped shut. With no mascot to speak of, the burger joint itself began to transform into one giant monster.
もう、なんで天井にピエロの絵なんて描いてんのよ、あの店。普通もっと違うところに労力割かない？そんなにピエロが好きなら入り口にでも飾っとけ。
Aoko aired out her grievances as she ran. There was no safe haven left. By a moment, the last remnants of civilization were being eroded away by fairy tales. Oh, there's a fucking dragon. Amusement Park had reached its final stage of snarkification. It was not just the mascot characters that had been granted life. Like the burger joint, even the buildings had begun to transform. The roller coaster had made its way about the park, writhed and twisted into like a Chinese dragon. Aoko and Sojiro stared, dumbfounded by the Ferris wheel, which had grown over 250 feet in height. Hordes of bread men closed in on them, as if to offer tickets.
この列整理は間に合ってるっての。
Groups of trinkets, shook kickshaws, rampaged to the park. The hall was punched into the envelopment. It was instantly filled. It was a battle of attrition with no end in sight. It was a matter of course, as there were few fairy tales about limited resources.
なんかどうしようもないぞ。こいつら増える一方だ。
スナーク本体を探して。童話の怪物には本体に当たる器物があるの。それさえ壊せば遊園地から出られるはず。
本体ってどんな？
さっき言ったでしょ。童話の怪物は現実にないものだって。今までいなかったおかしなやつとか現実じゃありえないもの、それが本体。
おかしなやつって例えば？
だから命のある人形とか空飛ぶゴーカートとか。
Aoko paused her firing for a moment. After saying this out loud, she realized just how deep their grave was dug. The amusement park was a treasure trove of fairy tale-esque creatures on any given day. You could say that what was impossible amidst the newly transfigured knickknacks running around.
そっか、おかしくないやつなんて一つもないんだ。この中に紛れ込んでる。
hoping that she was wrong. Could be no problem, but last Snark was the type deployed to bounded fields, seeing as it was commanding so many familiars. Not be unusual for its main body to have little or even no defenses. Furthermore, if it was modeled from a story about it being untouchable and unidentifiable, it would be logical to assume that it would collapse in on itself shortly after being discovered.
逆に言えば見つければ私たちの勝ち。そんな脆いやつが雑魚に紛れ込む。木の葉を隠すなら森の中って言うけど。
It's closer to the truth than Aoko realized. As long as there was the slightest possibility of it being hit by one of Aoko's stray bullets, it would not dare appear in front of them. Its true form was orchestrating the park from somewhere safe.
でもどこかに見えているはず。
What if it's the Ferris wheel?
スナークは本の主題だもの。常にページのどこかにいないと主人公の資格がない。
Where? But very simply, the Ferris wheel was the safest location in the park, as well as a symbol of its past glory.
あの子を捕まえるのは
Eyes opened wide at the sudden suggestion. Aoko had been trying to come up with a plan to overcome this stalemate. Seems Sojo had been racking his brain as well. His proposal was a simple one. They could not find Snark. They just needed to take out its master, Alice. Alice had not moved at all from the clock tower. Even from here they could make out her figure, draped in the moonlight.
それは一番ダメ。アリスを殺してもフラットスナークは止まらないし、このトンデモが外に溢れ出すことになる。だいたい私じゃあの子を殺せないから、よくて半殺しがいいところ。
Red Man, angered at the insults hurled towards his master, to attack us mercilessly to a crisp. Two stood back to back, catching the breath. No plan to speak of, and no route to escape. They had reached rock bottom. While the oddities were forming a circle around their prey, as if they smelled blood in the water. To be dragged into a bakery for the oven. Mixed in the meat grinder at the butcher shop. Skewered and paraded around the top of the carousel. The plank of a thorny pirate ship. For 2 years of slumber, they were eager to welcome their new guests.
一応聞いておきたいんだけど。
何？手短にね。今考え事してるから。
ああ、あの連中が何をしたいか嫌っていうほど伝わってくるんだけど、それってあの子の趣味なのかな。
その疑問はなかったわ。連中の人間嫌いは遊園地の怨念とフラットスナークの性格じゃない。基本的にまともなやついないから、アリスの使い魔って。ああ、でも。
Aoko was unable to deny that there were some similarities.
それは結構。それで青崎の考え事って止める方法考えついたのか。
期待させて悪いけどお手上げ。ま、あんたが殺されれば止まるでしょうけど。
それは嫌だ。とりあえず逃げよう。
しずきくん？
He blinked in surprise at the sudden turn of events. Sojo, but until now been meekly following her lead, grabbed Aoko's hand and pulled her with him into a head-on charge at the swarm of bread in an attempt to break out of the encirclement.
意味わかんなすぎ。なんで今の流れでそうなるのよ、あんたは。
Aoko nonetheless followed Sojo's uncharacteristically gung-ho lead, pressing him all the while. No chance of breaking through the surrounding wall of enemies with brute force. Aoko regained her bearings and let fire spray of magic bullets ahead of Sojo. Burst through the net and ran as hard as they could. At this point, all there was left to do was what they had planned from the outset: get out of the park. Not before addressing what needed to be addressed.
なんでよ、さっきはあんなに諦めよかったのに。
Could not begin to comprehend Sojo's reaction.
ミラーハウスの時と今は違うだろ。いいから走れ。
違わないわよ。あんたを殺そうとした私も、あんたを殺したいアリスも、理由も結果も同じよ、私たち。
She wondered what was getting her so worked up. Aoko did not stop. She told herself the degree of Sojiro's stupidity, charging the breadman so recklessly, that caused her to lose her cool.
あのね、一緒に逃げてるぐらいで勘違いしないでくれる？言っとくけど私、明日になったらまたあんたを殺しに行くから。死にたくないってんなら、ここで私からも逃げ出したら？
それはまた今度の話だろう。だいたい青崎に殺されるのならいいけど、あの子に殺されるのは嫌だ。
だからなんで？
だって顔も知らない、話したことさえない相手だ。
It was like someone had doused water over her blazing fury. Ako's anger was snuffed out by the absurd simplicity of his reasoning.
顔も知らないって。
Could it be that Sojiro did not mind being killed by someone, as long as he had met them? Aoko grimaced as she followed him. From a spot atop the clock tower, the girl observed the growth of her familiar. Flat Snark, savior of the discarded. It was a vile, vulgar fairy tale monster who provided those abandoned by fate with a glimmer of hope before snatching it away. Alice had it under her control, but she was still keen to keep the Snark from expressing its bad habits. After completing a lap around the park that had now reached the size of an entire town, Robin made its situation report.
そう、外を目指しているの。
It seemed Aoko was prioritizing the safety of the boy. Even if it resulted in wasting an entire day, choosing not to capitulate on a decision was very much like her.
青子のことだから、時計台ごと私を焼き払いに来るかと思ったけど。
The bird cheeped in response. Was it denying its master's portrait of Aoko, or agreeing that it was Aoko's style to do exactly that? An outsider might interpret its interjections either way.
退屈？
Robin jumped at being addressed so unexpectedly. It chirped and flapped its wings like a flustered servant, frantic to say otherwise.
珍しく気があったわね。いいわ。せっかくのゲームだし、もう少しだけ盛り上げましょう。
Calmly, she pulled out a small object from her pocket. It was a dark grey Easter egg, and emanating from inside it was the ticking of a clock. Robin knew it to be a ploy kickshaw with a bad attitude far exceeding Flat Snark's, known to be among the best in one-to-one situations.
行ってらっしゃい。称える時間は20分に設定したわ。いつも通り、控えめに壊れてきて。
Together with the witch's breath, the egg filled with praise disappeared. Suddenly, a strong wind swept through the park. I could have killed them all by myself, floated through the air. There was a disappointment of something enormous that was visible to all, yet overlooked. Words? Or was it that ploy? Aoko and Sojiro continued their dash towards the boundary separating the park from outside. The curio horde that stood in their way had reduced in number. The iron fence that separated the two from the outside world was just over 300 yards away. Fortunately, there were no particularly large buildings barring their path. If the Ferris wheel had stood in their way, they would have spelled the end. Thankfully, it had yet to reach its full strength. The only things that appeared before them were the weak oddities that could easily be handled by Aoko's simple nature of.
これならなんとか。
He would have said make it to the fence, if only her lungs would allow it. Since Aoko was utilizing the ample mana filling the park, the tank of magical energy was nearly full. Though the condition of her body's circuits was steadily improving, to the extent that she would be able to unleash at least one all-out onslaught. Till something unusual was hovering above her field of vision. It was locked on Sojiro, hovering 10 feet above him, over to one side.
しずきくん、ちょっと。
ああ、さっきからついてきてる。
Sojiro had seemingly noticed it before Aoko, hence his previous awkward glances towards the sky. In truth, it would have been stranger for him to not notice as the thing was practically glued to him. In terms of size, the floating object measured about 3 feet in diameter. Tiles covered its exterior, about which a multitude of spinning lights danced about.
卵かな。
Sojiro asked, not really sure what to call it.
卵卵って言ったら割れる卵。
Bullets bounced off it like it was made of rubber. That trait, the ability to deflect all outside interference, confirmed to Aoko that this thing was undoubtedly a ploy fictional. Eat.
やっぱり外からのルールじゃ壊れないか。しずきくん、あれから絶対に目をそらさないで。いい、何があっても見続けること。視界の隅に入れとくだけでいいから。
ああ。
Aoko picked up her pace as she barked orders. The Eggman is sat on the wall, cracked just as the tail spoke of. Oh, Humpty Dumpty! Nothing anyone could do or say would cause him to fall, but the moment they stopped looking, he would tumble down and break into pieces.
いわく、王様の軍隊でも元に戻せない数の破片。
I thought it was couldn't. Okay. That was a Mother Goose poem, Humpty Dumpty. If Sojiro was his target, then the moment he averted his gaze, it would tumble and explode.
まあ、爆発するかどうかは知らないけど。
Either way, it was going to scatter something troublesome when it fell. Its oval shape, the keyhole adorning the front, and writing inscribed upon it. They all made her anxious. If it was an egg, that meant it was going to hatch at some point. Even if he continued to stare, once the time came for whatever was said to come out, they would have even less ability to conserve their energy.
青崎、早すぎないか。あまり全力で走ると。
後のことは考えないで。いいからしずきくんは卵だけに集中して。
At this critical juncture, Breadman stepped out to join the egg and block their path. Not gonna lie, I was about to make a joke about Sojiro not knowing what Humpty Dumpty when Aoko was explaining all the fairy tales. Didn't think it would actually come true.
邪魔！
Breadmen were marching forth in a grand battalion. At that level of firepower, Aoko should have easily mowed them down.
肩焼きかこの。
Fast. Snap failed to do the job. That meant it was time for her to put her crest to use. Draw. Formula triggered bullet encased in a full wind jacket. If her previous shots were the equivalent of a machine gun volley, this was her artillery shot. It's her AoE attack. The hard crust bread that had absorbed her snapped without a dent, scattered into thousands of tiny pieces at her jaw's torrent.
うわ。
Of course, the destruction did not end with just the breadmen. What once been a brick road was now thoroughly stripped of its pavement. The nearby stalls had been warped into twisted steel skeletons. Spectacle that made Sojiro question what the great obstacle to their escape was. The breadmen or Aoko's ability to lay waste to things.
ちょっと、なんで距離取るのよそこ。そばにいないと危ないじゃない。ほら、もっとこっち。言っとくけど、あんたがあいつらに囲まれちゃったらアウトよ。私、人質とか意味ないタイプだし、そもそも区別して撃つとか、そういうのできないし。
This made a lot of sense to Sojiro. He had not fully appreciated the part about hostages, but he got the gist of it.
つまり、今はどこであろうと危険なのか。
あんたね。
Offended though, he was by his typical naive response. She could not help but be impressed. Sojiro was a straight arrow through and through. His eyes stayed firmly focused on the egg overhead, even amidst the chaos of the melee unfolding before him.
その分なら安心か。物分かりは悪いけど、一度言われたことはきっちり守るあたり、あなたのいいところよね。
そんなことより青崎、俺の気のせいならいいんだけど、さっきのパン、硬くなかったか。
まあね、あいつら少しずつ強くなってきてるわ。大量生産が軌道に乗ったんで、今度はクオリティアップをテーマにしたのかも。しずきくんでもお察しの通り、 ここからは手強くなっていく一方よ。あのパンたちでさえ個体差が出てきたみたいだし、考えたくないけど、そのうちジャム塗ったりレタス乗っけたり、果ては合体したりして。
She was joking, her eyes were dead serious. Soldier shuddered at the thought of the situation growing even more dire.
じゃあそのうちミラーハウスの人形ぐらいに怖くなるのか、あいつ。
間違いなくね。そこまでレアなパンになったら、私も自分だけで手一杯になる。ところでしずきくん、ああいうのと喧嘩できる？
Soldier shook his head, a look of complete aversion upon his face.
でしょ？なら急ぎましょう。いろいろ余裕ないんだから。
Aoko took a quick, deep breath. They began to sprint once again. Far in the distance, through the fog, the iron fence waited 300 paces away. As long as nothing happened, they would make it there in one piece. Soldier followed after Aoko, holding on to that all too inconvenient hope. Hope was something ever fleeting. In fact, it lasted not even 300 yards. The edge of the amusement park may well have been on the edge of the world. Look at all those fences. Dozens of undulating horizons could be seen, crowding the sky like a giant cloud or a thick curtain. Perhaps groaning lips. It was the end of the road, the outer limit of an outrageous and fantastical realm. And yet, Aoko found it to be much like the last page of an enormous picture book. The sight turned her mind blank. Well, this is about as bad as it gets, she thought. Snark, this island of despair, had, at least, Aoko to her knees as she stared at the swelling water. The park indeed had an end. Even now, as Aoko and Soldier had expected, a fence divided the amusement park from the residential area neighbouring it. It had both doubled in height and been made sturdier, not the hurdle she had foreseen before even laying eyes on it. Expecting it to have been snarkified, Aoko had come prepared to demolish an obstacle or two. But this construction before her went far beyond a mere wall. There was an ocean that separated the underworld from the mortal one. The iron fence was like a restless, surging sea. One or two walls could easily be toppled. Even 10 or 20 could be dealt with one way or another. Between the power left in her body and that which filled the park, putting it on a brave front was within her power. She could fully mobilize her circuits and her crest to the point of burnout in a last-ditch effort, like some reenactment of the parting of the Red Sea.
でも、それで終わり。
Even if a path could be opened, she would not have the energy left to walk it. And it was obvious what would become of her afterward. The residents would hardly forgive her for wreaking such a havoc around their park, like ants drawn to honey, swarm the helpless girl and tear her to pieces. Bonded and exhausted, she felt the faint sting of a remorse. Escaping the park. Looking back on how they had gotten here, Aoko recognized that her choices had been her undoing. At the golden full moon, beams of steel bent and merged like wire steel sculptures. It was only a matter of time before the amusement park itself became one colossal monster. The horde of familiars, gathered in the plaza where Alice was, had formed an impenetrable blockade around her. Just above her, the head of the boy beside her, whispering egg, called Scratch Dumpty, continued to shuffle what appeared on its surface.
Aozaki!
しずきくん。
The boy's voice snapped Aoko out of her trance, if only for a moment. The stark reality of the situation quickly dawned on the novice mage. The sheer hopelessness of it all, as it ripped out and snatched away any will she had to resist.
ゲートに行こう。ここはどうしようもないけど、入り口ならもうちょっとマシだろ。フラットスナークだっけ。こいつにもルールがあるって言ったじゃないか。なら、これは役割の問題だ。初めから鉄柵は通れない壁だけど、ゲートなら 出入り口として機能しているかもしれない。
Sojiro had not given in to panic. Aoko found herself honestly admiring Sojiro's ability to analyze Snark's characteristics, given the circumstances. Calm, she stilled her resolve.
そうね。確かに門はあると思う。けど、たどり着くのは難しいわ。一番弱かった焼きたてパンですら、今はもうあれだもの。広場や入り口には、もっと上等なのがたむろしてるだろうし、門だって、あの観覧車以上の怪物かもしれない。確か、大きなキッツィちゃんだったでしょ。
青崎はゲートには行かないのか。
まあね。それよりこっちの方が現実的だし。
Aoko took another glance at the undulating iron fences. It was too late to achieve their goal of making it out alive. In that case, she decided to prioritize the other promise she had made.
今からこの鉄柵を壊すから、あなたはそこから外に出て。それで、私の役割はおしまいよ。
Her words of few returned told the whole story. She was telling him to escape himself.
信じられない。こんなの青崎だけじゃ壊せないだろ。
私だけならね。でも今はこの遊園地が味方してる。燃料がこれだけあるんだから、私は重心になるだけでいいんだし、一発でかいのお見舞いしてやるわ。ま、それでも一回が限度だから、穴を開けたらあんたには全力で走り抜けてもらうしかないけど。
He would carve a path through this iron sea of fences, gambling on one final effort, a great incantation to launch the biggest projectile she could manage. As an outsider, Sojiro could not even begin to imagine how much of a burden this would be for her. All he could imagine was a hazy vision of Aoko being left behind in the park. What happened to her? Would that girl in black come to save her? Cruel as it was to imagine, he knew she would not. After Aoko had exhausted her very best in order to save him, that girl would not stay her hand. The only way Alice would let Aoko off the hook was if Aoko killed a Sojiro as payment. So...
20メートルぐらい離れてて、準備に手間取るけど、その卵の表面が茹で上がるまでには終わらせるから。
It went without saying that this was the only path.
待ってくれ。俺を逃がすって言うけど、それに意味はあるのか、青崎。
ないけど、外に出られたところでアリスから逃げ切れるとは思えないし。けど、これぐらいは最後の意地よ。守るって言ったんだから、できるところまでやらないと。
Surprised by her seemingly moral stance, Sojiro saw Aoko in a new light. Well, of course. Sojiro realized that she was not fighting for his sake, or the sake of her pride.
そうだったな。けど、それなら俺だけ逃がすのはらしくないぞ。
何よ。いいから離れてて。
Aoko eased off, just a bit. She recalled how, an hour ago, he had gotten the better of her.
青崎、まだ意地を張れるんなら、他のことをやろう。このお化けみたいな鉄柵を壊せるなら、他に壊すべきものがあるはずだ。
ないわよ。悪いけど、私は目に見えるものしか壊せないの。最後まで形のない希望にすがるとか、考えるのも寒気がする。いい？今はフラットスナークなんかより、この壁を壊してあんたを足抜けさせるのが私の現実。私に負える最大限の責任って。
逃げるのか。
Aoko was just about to turn her back on him when Sojiro clutched her hand. His words caused something inside of her to boil with rage. It was as though someone had set her heart on fire. Surprise that pricked open her true feelings, and as the disappointment she felt towards herself thawed her frozen limbs.
誰が逃げるのはそっちで、逃がしてあげるのはこっちだって言うのよ。甘く見ないで。いざとなったら遊園地ごと爆破してみせるわ。
そうか。なら、ここで俺を逃がすのは無駄だな。その気迫は本命のために取っておこう。それまでは俺も手伝うから。
は？手伝う？それこそ無駄な気遣いよ。頭きた。いいから逃げろバカ。 だいたい走り詰めで息も絶え絶えなやつなんか使えないわよ。
そりゃいい加減ヘトヘトだけど、そういう青崎なんか疲れ以上に傷の方が痛んでるだろ。
To mention the injury to her back that Aoko had nearly forgotten about. Even now, she couldn't ignore the pain that the automaton had inflicted on her spine. She just needs a Snickers bar. With iron will, she'd managed to push it out of her mind. Obviously.
ほら、魔術とか抜きにすればまだ俺の方がマシじゃないか。入り口までおぶっていくことぐらいならなんとか。
できないことは口にしないで。もういいから言って。慣れているもの、私は。でもあなたは違う。こういうの初めてでしょ。だからいいの。
The fact that they were a team. The fact that she would still have to kill him after all this. None of the irony was lost on her as she said these words. It didn't matter anymore. Still, Sojiro didn't let go of her hand. He gripped it even harder. His expression was the same as ever. Aoko frowned, trying to figure out if he was upset with her.
確かにこういうのは初めてだ。けど山じゃ危険な目ぐらい合ってる。鹿に襲われたことだってあるんだぞ、俺は。
As a city girl, she had no idea what it meant to be attacked by a deer. His determination was apparent enough. Looking back on it now, he had maintained his composure through it all. A normal person would barely be able to talk through such panic. Perhaps growing up deep in the mountains, far from civilization, that taught him how to stay calm in the face of so much.
だから信じてくれ。少しでいいから。
He spoke his plain, unadulterated feelings. He released his hand. There was no lie in him. In fact, he was too honest. So much that she found it so hard to believe him. Sojiro had no reason to go that far. As it stood, Aoko had no future. After confessing this and telling him to escape, why did this boy still offer to help a person like her?
わからない。どうしてそこまでするの？私に付き合えばあなたは死ぬのよ。これが最後だからちゃんと考えてよね。あなたはここで逃げるべきよ。
それはわかるよ。でも行かない。
Sojiro answered immediately, realizing that Aoko was looking for his reason. This level of insight in Sojiro demanded a round of applause.
そうすると青崎が死んでしまいそうだ。
His words were as irrational as always.
だからどうしてそこまでするのよ、あんたは。
He was yelling out of frustration. After thinking for a moment, Sojiro replied,
そりゃ君が好きだからだろ。
simple and to the point. His face seemed to ask why she would even question him so. There was a pause, no more than 2 seconds. His surprise attack had stopped Aoko in her tracks. This was not the only one who had an ace up her sleeve. That line reached deeper than even Flat Snark could ever hope to. All Aoko could respond with was an expression of pure shock. It was a simple, stubborn reason. The strongest kind of earth. Sojiro Shizuki was indeed incomprehensible. To be able to work unconditionally with someone who was trying to kill him. Daddy, chill, we're not even the halfway point. If you guys don't remember, or Max, he's still misunderstanding what he's saying, because he's saying that I like you, and literally I like you, as if he likes her as a person. And then she's interpreting it as a confession. At least that's what I think is the situation right now. And he's still being a bonehead and still saying that. She felt as though she'd finally grasped a sliver of his true nature. Oimaru and the others' assessment of him was correct, as vexing as it was to her to admit.
バカね。私はあなたのこと嫌いなのに。
He laughed at her sour grumbling. At this point, he was used to her insults. Their clash of wills ended here. Aoko's blood ran hot from her blazing heart. If he was going to make a face like that, all she could do was try to think of a way to get them both home.
私だって逃げっぱなしは性に合わないし。いいわよ。 最後まで粘ってみる。それにしずきくんが付き合ってくれるなら何かの役には立つでしょ。
Though her tone had lightened, there was still hesitation in her eyes. It was only natural. Aoko had not even a clue as to how to begin to fight the snark. If only she'd been just a little more skilled, or trained just a bit more, there might have been some way to look for it.
我ながら情けない。せめて正体を暴く手がかりでもあればいいんだけど。
Unconsciously, she let her apprehension show. Sniveling was pointless. She would just have to figure it out by herself, but...
ん？なんだ？正体さえ分かればいいのか？
Eh? Aoko gave him a look, as if to ask what that was supposed to mean.
いや、だからおかしなものはどれかってことだろ？
Soldier also made a face that suggested she should have brought it up sooner.
わかるのあんた。
多分。いや、結構前から気になっていたんだけど。
Soldier whispered in her ear quietly, so as not to be overheard.
あ、
It was certainly unexpected, but then again equally obvious. After he explained the mistake, she knew right away that he was correct. At last, she had an inkling of Flat Snark's original form, namely... Is it the Ferris wheel? They strategized for 10 minutes. After deliberating the Snark's true form and figuring out a plan of attack, the two exchanged nods in acceptance of their roles.
それじゃあここからは別行動ね。でもミラーハウスの時みたいなのは勘弁してよ。この作戦の肝はあなたなんだから。開始1分でドジったら本当に打つ手なしだからね。
Though she jabbed him for his previous failure as a decoy, her voice was bright. Aoko's original vigor had turned to her at Soldier's discovery of the truth. Meanwhile, Soldier was also getting serious in his own way. He took Aoko's warning to heart.
ならいいけど。いい？さっきと立場は反対よ。失敗したら死ぬのは私じゃなくてそっち。もうフォローに回れないから、できるだけ慎重にね。
分かってる。今更ながら、やっぱりさっき逃がしてもらえばよかったと思うぐらい慎重だ。
Then one day Aoko wants a date and Soldier will say, "We already did, I almost died." It might be like, "You want to do that? But we already did that." He'll be like, "What's a date?" And throw this regret or not. Taking your advice earlier. Okay. Soldier nodded, telling her to leave with him. Though he made it sound like he was holding a grudge, it seemed to him to be the only way of showing her his resolve. Aoko let out a sigh of defeat. Once more, she couldn't figure him out.
ほんと、大バカなんだか大物なんだか。
It would be funny if, like, I was actually wrong about what I was saying, because, like, the game implies that Sojo doesn't understand, what he's saying by saying "I like you," right? But it would be funny if they subvert that later to be like, "Oh yeah, I was saying I like you the whole time." I don't know if that's gonna happen, or like when that turns out to be a thing. I don't know. It'd be cool to see though.
でも任せた。期待してるわ、しずきくん。
Yeah, I wanted to say that she believed in him. Apparently, that was too embarrassing for her. Aoko turned away from Sojiro and began to run. She had begun to think that maybe this change of pace was not so bad after all. So ended the intermission. The young cast members were handed their new lines. Whatever happened next, the Night of Witches had, at long last, entered its climax.
別行動？あの二人が？
He was filled with foreboding at the Robin's report. Apparently they had gone in opposite directions. Park's residents had set off after the boy witness, and it would take them mere minutes to capture him, so the bird said.
どういうこと？追いかけているのは本当に彼？青子が変装しているのではなく。
The robin flapped its wings, chirping away any doubt. It had seen them with its own two eyes. Aoko was heading for the plaza. The cocky brat was making a run for the roller coaster. I don't think it'll be this deep, but I wonder in the original JP when they said ski, there'll be a 3-gun at Red's eye. I don't think they would do that. Otherwise, they probably would have done the whole Furigana thing in English as well, because they've been kind of doing that, right? Because you know how Nasu likes to do the whole was it foreign language and then different words on top of the foreign language, like like it's saying something in foreign language, but then it actually means something else. Yeah. So we've seen a couple of instances of that where they were speaking. What was it? Latin? I think it was Latin. And there's like English on top of it. I don't know if that was actually what was being said in Latin. But yeah.
青子が彼を見捨てたですって。そんな簡単なことならいいけど、ダンプティは彼に張り付いているの？
Robin nodded enthusiastically. It didn't know about the other birds, or with its superior night vision. It had seen that sucker clearly because he had moved to a high point. That
ダン
sucker.
プティはなんて？
This bird had an attitude, man.
最後まで歌わせろ。こんな褒め殺したい間抜けはまたとない。ですって。
Scratch Dumpty was the ticking time bomb that would drop and detonate the moment its target averted its gaze. That is, as long as his target continued to observe him. In a way, he was a gentlemanly ploy kickshaw, though Alice wished he would forego such necessities when in battle.
そうね。
Necessities.
視線を切らないだけではダンプティからは逃げられない。表面の死が完成すれば扉が開く。彼がどこまで逃げようと、あと少しでダンプティが閉まってくれるわ。
Till the park, or rather the snark, was destroyed, Sojo would not be able to escape. Which meant the larger concern was Aoko. Aoko had promised to protect the boy, which begged the question, what was she running to?
ここにいる限り、青子の動向はつかめない。
Let's looked out over the park, ignoring the robin's attempt to get her attention with its plumage. That snark had nearly reached its full size. It was a different breed of beast compared to the other cheap ploys. To her, it was one of her 3 most irreplaceable and precious familiars.
そうね。任せたわスナーク。青子が諦めない以上、あなたも手は抜かないで。
Alice remained where she was. With the same historical merit as the troll under the bridge, and the poison-clawed reptile, Flat Snark was one of Alice's ultimate ploys. She was placing her trust in its reputation and ability.
でも忘れないで。これはゲームよ。勝敗がついたのなら、私のところに帰ってきて。
Drifting fog ignored its master's words. There was the one thing that Alice had misread. Flat Snark was a king, even among the other ploys, of terrible, vulgar antics. Death to the defeated, gruesome tragedy to the vanquished. It found no pleasures unless it brought about a dramatic ruination of life and wealth. Fog billowed like wicked laughter. After all, only a king had the right to decide the fate of the vanquished, and the Snark's greed could not be contained. It hadn't even the slightest intent to play fair, despite its master's orders. "100 feet high, one careful step at a time, The figure made its way gingerly up the track, which stretched into the heart of the amusement park. Each stayed his beating heart, a beating chest, and the pounding of his breath. Even tiny movements were an obstacle to his progress. Amazingly, the one making this pale-faced advance higher and higher was Sojiro's Shizuki. Far below, he saw that a horde of bread creatures had congregated by the roller coaster platform. As they bustled this way and that, their numbers continued to increase by the minute, seemingly cheering on Sojiro with raised arms as he made his ascent. They jeered as if beckoning him to come down.
助かった。あれ、高いところは苦手なんだ。
Of course, neither did Sojiro, but his current state was the lesser of two evils. The thing that followed him now was the floating egg. After heaving a huge sigh, Sojiro bent forward a little bit and climbed a track that inclined towards the heavens. 150 feet now. If this were a skyscraper, he'd be on the 16th floor. Was it 60th? Or 16th? 16th, yeah, 16th. A strong gust of wind whipped through his hair. Humans had an instinctual fear of heights. In particular, a place like this, which called forth visions of falling to one's death, would cause a person's knees to tremble against their will. There was an instinct that forewarned death, urging its master return to the safety of the ground. That was a reasonable reaction. Climbing the roller coaster tracks went beyond funny stories and into the realm of fantasy. The strong winds and change in air pressure were a hindrance. His instinct screamed at him to stop, causing his limbs to go numb, his muscles to go limp, and his mind to race. Even if he had been tied to a lifeline, a mere 15 feet of climbing would still have caused his thoughts to freeze out of sheer terror. It would only get worse from here, exponentially so. Every foot forward increased the load of both his mind and his body by another degree.
よし、頂上まであと少し。
Burden on his mind notwithstanding, he carefully measured the toll on his body with every step. His legs, which had carried him running this far, threatened to buckle the moment he let down his guard. His fatigue was likely why Aoko had stressed that Sojiro's role was more dangerous than hers.
待てよ。逆を言うと、疲れてなければなんとかなると思ってたんだよな、青崎は。
Sojiro laughed as he stared into the floating egg. He reflected on the course of events that had led to this absurd situation. 10 minutes ago, they had been engaged in conversation.
じゃあ次ね。正体が分かった以上、あとはどう壊すかを話し合いましょう。
Sojiro felt a shudder travel down his spine at Aoko's smug grin. In hindsight, Aoko had been more than happy at this point to make him do something absurd.
どう壊すかって、それなら。
Sojiro wondered aloud from what he had seen. Aoko had enough firepower to tear clean through the fence. He had refrained from speculating about Flatsnark's true form because it felt there was nothing they could do about it, even if they knew. But that had changed. For Aoko, the impossible was quite literally within her grasp.
そうでもないわ。私の目算だと、あと50メートル分、ギリギリで届かない。
Fear filled Sojiro's eyes. Aoko lifted a hand to her long hair and, with a magically charged fingertip, clipped a clean tuft of it.
足りない分は努力と根性ってね。あなたはできるだけ高いところまで逃げて。頃合いを見て合図を出すから。そうしたらこれを空に放ってくれる？しずきくんの役目はそれだけでいいから。
Based on where Aoko pointed her gaze, she did not really mean to leave it up to Sojiro to pick the highest place he could find. She was staring conspicuously at one of the amusement park's two main attractions, the roller coaster.
つまり、青崎とは別行動をとって、あの怪物たちに追われながら、高いところに逃げ込めと。
そういうこと。ほら、あのうねうね動き出してるコースターのレールとか、よくない？
There were two demons in this park. Her smile made even Sojiro want to respond that it was far from perfect.
疑いたくはないんだが、本当はあの子とグルで 俺を遠回しに殺そうとしてるんじゃないか。
あら、私に殺されるのならいいんでしょ？
人の出現を悪用するのは良くないと思う。
Sojiro hung his head. This was not sane. If he did as she said, he would die from exhaustion before Kitsy even had a chance to eat him.
私だって鬼じゃないわ。ほら、こっち向いて。おまじないかけてあげる。
It was the lightest of touches, close enough for their breath and skin to come in contact.
Oh.
Ducky finished with a hushed voice. For one of them, this was a rather mundane magecraft. For the other, it was a head-spinning, intimate ambush.
軽く、弱く、うまく、早く。
See? Exactly what I was saying! Fucking, the Japanese is on top, and then the English is just different.
チクタクチクタク、急げや急げ。
Words that could not be produced by a normal larynx, carrying a peculiar weight onto them, reverberated against his eardrums. If words were given colours, these would have been the colour of her name, blue. Sojiro's exhausted body and burning blood gently cooled.
飛ぶ、泳ぐ、駆け抜ける。チクタクチクタク、汽笛を鳴らせ。星はいつでも北の空。どこまでも、いつまでも。
In reality, it took but a few seconds, but the sun contact had felt a little longer.
よし、暗示成功！成功したはず！ここまで手応えがあったの初めてだし、アリスの小言もたまには役に立つじゃない。
A very merry Aoko stood aside a very confused Sojiro. After he asked what the heck had occurred, she responded.
簡単な暗示よ。一時的に恐怖心を消しておいたから、高いところに登っても平気なはず。あの手の作業で一番足を引っ張るのは同様でしょ？恐怖も何も感じなければ、地上何メートルだろうと、平均台とそう変わらないってわけ。
Seemed to get it. It actually sounded like Greek to Sojiro, but he accepted it as an explanation for her strange actions. It arrived at the summit of the track. From nearly 200 feet high, Sojiro had a bird's eye view of the entire amusement park. He was able to spot Aoko's figure right away. In the plaza not so far from here, she seemed to be occupied with something conspicuous. Her surroundings lay still. The breadmen were still busy trying to figure out how to reach Sojiro by trial and error from the roller coaster's entrance. They were over 300 feet away now.
汗をかくはずだ。こんなに移動したのか。
Strong winter gales quickly dried the sweat on his brow, but he was drenched underneath his shirt. This much sweat was worth at least a half-mile run, not to mention all the scares he had experienced throughout the night.
でもよかった。あとは合図を待つだけだ。
Felt a wave of relief. At the thought of Aoko destroying the snark in this nightmarish park. Simply happy he could repay a bit of his debt from the House of Mirrors. Blue bullet rose from the plaza where Aoko was located.
合図だ。
Sojiro stood atop the tracks, pulled out a pouch he had stowed in his pocket, and tossed it forward. Without any regard for his questionable footing, he gave it a mighty overarm pitch. The small pouch drew a parabolic curve in Aoko's direction, quickly becoming untied in midair. Be awkward if it didn't untie. Inside the bag was a lock of her hair and a small stone weight.
高いところから風に乗せてくれれば、あとは何とかするから。
Quad said, but it was Sojiro's efforts that had set the plan in motion. The tuft of hair remained airborne, drifting as if watching over its owner. Sojiro's job was done. He remained concerned about the egg hovering over him, but there was nothing he could do about it. Sojiro breathed a sigh of relief and leaned forward to watch the rest of the plan unfold, but then...
ムム、
In the corner of his eye, he thought he spotted something familiar approaching Aoko.
Route set. Direct. 1層、2層、予備に3層。魔力提供、体現に固定。循環よし、射角よし。術式安定、大まかよし。
The pattern began to carve itself into the brick street, the casting of an unprecedented incantation with unprecedented rage. Keeping the rising tension contained within her chest, the fledgling mage snapped her fingers.
決めた。ツアープラン、スターマイン。
He kneeled at the center of the formula and raised her head to the night sky. Not even a glimpse of the transmogrified fantasy back around her to her vision now. Only one thing, one untouchable thing, was reflected in her blue eyes.
実はずっと気になっていたことが。
This is how their conversation started a few minutes prior. Sojiro began with a simple statement of fact. In truth, it really was the simplest of discrepancies. Any difference between the reality of an hour ago and the illusion of the present was both infinitesimal and infinite.
雲があったから勘違いしたんだろうけど。
It was hiding in plain sight. Too impossible to be real, too outlandish to be here. In this amusement park where every paradigm had shifted, something was brazenly flaunting its normalcy.
今夜は新月なんだ、青崎。
思えば初めっからその形だったものね、あんたは。
Oh, it's the moon! The distance from the Earth to the moon was 238,900 miles. It truly was identical to the actual moon, but this monster indeed lived up to its eerie reputation. The distance that vast, there would be no need to hide. It could flaunt its true form for all to see. But if it had to hide its true form, that meant it was vulnerable. The monster's camouflage implied that it sat within the reach of human hands.
こっちの最大射程はよくて600ってところだけど。
At this point, it was time to give it all she had. Drawing on the energy surging throughout the park, she extended her firing arm. Blue firework launched into the air. Looking up at her hair dancing in the wind above, Aoko reached out her right hand as if to catch the night sky. The mage's own body made for the perfect catalyst. For a female mage, she had grown out over so many years, made for a particularly valuable and powerful source of fuel. To use it, all she had to do was apply her will. She locked the fingers on both her hands together and shouted.
三層展開、全術式連結起動。
He hurled forth a clear challenge to bind the moon to herself. Began to whirl about in a vortex. Monster high above bore its fangs at the sight of the blue spell that appeared in midair.
見抜かれたです。
Each time Alice had noticed the change, the hostility between Aoko and the snark was palpable.
そうなら青子の勝ちよ。すぐに戻りなさい。確かに雨雲を消したのはヒートの上げすぎだけど、それぐらいは多めに見て。スナーク
Fog continued to thicken with no sign of abating. The moon that floated in the night sky could not pardon such an insolent mage. As if the Lord of the Night would bow down to such impudence. There was no staying its wrath at a challenge so flagrant.
スナーク
Then swooped in to give its report, but Alice waved it away. Her gaze was fixed on the transforming golden moon. Paws of restraint did not reach it. This fairy tale monster was beholden to nobody. It would have no qualms unleashing its vast might upon its puny prey. The core of a magic bullet howled. The magic circuits within her body spun. Aoko fed them magical energy, scorching her nerves with imaginary flame. She was linked to the formula inscribed on the ground. The spell was read and executed the same as it always was, but its output was beyond reckoning. This much firepower, even this mundane process would invite injury upon its caster. It was enough to burn up the nerves that were acting as the barrel.
でもいける
Imaginary heat had reached a terrifying temperature. Aoko trembled at this endless feeling, would have to grin and bear lest their efforts come to naught. Aoko could no longer move. But she had learned the Snark's true form from Sojuro. She gave up on any superiority a movable turret offered, instead opting to become a stationary cannon. This was the only way she could reach it. It was impossible to hunt the Snark unless she anchored a crest at this location and angle. At the same time, this action revealed that she was out of options. Once the fuse was lit, she would have no choice but to fight to the bitter end. Aoko took a deep breath. This was the way she wanted it. Her preparations were complete. She'll be able to deliver this maelstrom of magical energy directly to the moon, like a rocket payload. The third mid-air layer served as a cannon's muzzle in sight. Fire the magical energy out once it reached criticality, then Aoko to adjust the angle of fire.
きれ
The moon became warped within her scope. As Aoko charged her magical energy, Oi displayed its golden form as if to mock her. Come, worship the heavens, Aulus scion of an ancient bloodline. For there it was, a point among the otherworldly sky, a mythical visage obfuscated by jade mists and azure clouds. Called the greatest treasure known to the world of Magecraft. Rarity more valuable than an entire kingdom. Crown Phantasm.
あれがフラットスナーク
Dead apart from the first, the world's greatest fabrication.
まだ早い
Mystic screamed at her to delay no further. This fairy tale monster was the greatest of its kind, and it was about to expose its true form. Its open hostility made it clear that it was ready to counterattack.
ちもう動けない逃げを捨てての大栄翔先に撃たれたらそこで終わりだ
You had to shoot it down first. Magical energy was at 80%. The formula was operating normally. What was left was to pull the trigger, but I wonder if Sojuro has some weird hunch that would be weird later, something similar to Neon's glasses. Now? They can pull anything out of him, honestly. He's such a trump card. When he doesn't know shit, he just like pulls things out randomly. Some voice inside her head asked if that was really okay. She had one shot at this, and there was no going back. It was a battle of precision with no room for miscalculations. Even a tenth of a second of hesitation would tip the scales. Was she ready for the pain? Was she ready to deal with the fallout if she missed? Could she really even take down the moon with such a tiny bullet in the first place?
いいとりあえず当たった後で考える
Is fixed upon the moon, filled with determination. She knew that the moment she fired, the intense recoil would overwhelm her entire body. Still, she shouted.
上等出し惜しみはなし目いっぱいぶん回すわ
With every ounce of spirit she possessed, she fired her ultra-long-range projectile into the sky. The third layer embraced the magic bullet fired from the surface of the earth. The crest, an extension of Aoko's self, unleashed light to pierce the moon. However, it's moon rays! What is that? This blue canopy pulverized the beam. It returned the ether, that 3,000 degree flame, to nothing as it came in contact with the bullet. The recoil of the Grand Magecraft literally boiled her blood. Her body couldn't handle it. It stopped. Her brain went numb from the pain and impact. Her nerves putrefied from end to end. The magic crest revived them all by force. Even though her vision had gone white, she could still see it. Swallowing the blood in her mouth, Aoko looked up with a scowl. An enormous shield of ice and sneering deformed skull.
撃つのが遅すぎた。それとも早すぎた。盾を作られる前に撃てばよかった。それとも正面からじゃ無謀すぎた。どっちでもいい。一層、二層、再起動。急いで。
There's no time to think or hesitate. Magical energy throughout the park began to gather. Aoko knelt, across from the tyrannical force of the moon, facing them. She intuited that the ice had yet to fully form. That Snark still hadn't reached its full strength. Which was exactly why. Accelerating the spell, Aoko damaged her own body. The burden of linking the formula to the Snark caused intense pain. All she could do was grit her teeth and endure it. Because... Aoko had gotten a read on their relative strengths. Even if its volume of magical energy was identical, Snark's form, its mystical scale, was on a different league. Aoko could charge her energy to its absolute limit, and that would barely make a dent in the ice wall. There was nothing she could do to prevent her own annihilation if the Snark gathered as much energy as it could. He loaded her next shot. She issued orders to the floating third layer. Ignoring the toll on her body, she began to accelerate the first layer of formula. The right-hand single layer was to absorb and store surrounding magical energy. The thick fog that drifted through the park was an ancient ether, spewed out by Flat Snark's own body. Aoko could pour it into her formula. His body, which had integrated with the formula, took on an amount of magical energy that far surpassed its maximum capacity. It seethed in agony. It trembled in delight. For a mage, magical energy was propellant to reach the realm of mystics. The expansion of internal time, the liquefaction of the self, the release from the physical. They were all what one might call a near-death experience. The precipice of what lay beyond, Aoko stood firm and faced reality. Still, reality had come to break her will. The gap between them was plain to any observer. The gun barrel named Aoko Aozaki had not a chance to chip away at that lump of ice. He accelerated the spell further. Skull grinned. That ice was no shield. It was a hammer to crush mages who did not know their place. The moon laughed as it prepared to crush not just Aoko, but the boy atop the roller coaster, as well as the park in its entirety. Her circuits were on the verge of going critical. Her body had been charged with scorching power supply, from the fingertips to her eyeballs. She would see the bullet fired. She would arrange the Magecraft formula as quickly as her nerves transmission the speed would allow. A single attack was not enough. There was no way to shoot it from its flank. Which meant there was only one solution. Third layer began to transform. It switched from direct to alternating current. The spell's supposed strong point was its ability to adjust its trajectory mid-flight. Right now, all she wanted was numbers.
セットオクタグラム全階層ぶん回せ
Blue sun shined down upon the amusement park. Beams of light at maximum output streaked forth to pierce the golden moon. Holding down the trigger, he continued to fire, taking in energy ad infinitum. The flames shot forth at critical level. The ice would neither melt nor mar. The amount of sheer heat could make a dent in something formed from such a colossal amount of magical energy. A hole in her circuit sent them berserk. Blood began to run free. The battle had become a tussle over the magical energy that filled the park. From the very beginning, this had been the Snark's home turf. The Snark had control over at least 80% of the space, or at 20 at best. Castle of Ice descended as if to call the match. What she could do was delay the inevitable. She knew that she had been backed into a wall, but right now, the only thing she could do was keep firing. Again, perhaps not. There was another option. If she converted all her magical energy into her defense, there was a tiny chance. Tiny. A great possibility, in fact, that she could save just her. Clinging to that broken hope, could continue to rotate her circuits. Time seemed to stop at the magical energy overdose. A second of intense pain lasted an eternity. Then, amidst everything, something approached one step at a time. Something from among the park's shadows. Something. 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 He felt goosebumps from head to toe. The issue was no longer the ice overhead. In the midst of this stillness, the Red Death drew closer, step by ominous step. Circuits in her mind began to rupture out of terror. The composition of her formula and soul began to rip apart. There it was, just behind her. Its footsteps came to a halt. It reached around and cupped her face in its blood-stained hands. He wanted to scream out with all her might. This is it. Nothing matters. You can kill us. Don't run. It doesn't matter. Quit hiding and reveal yourself. Use whatever you can. Show no mercy. That was it. She had one final card to play. Once, a miracle had been gifted to her, almost as a joke. It made the ice look like child's play. That was what the Red Death had come to kill. Using it would spell ruin. Not using it would mean death by ice. Why hesitate? There were no conditions on its use. There was no price to pay for its power. She simply would cease to be herself. That was all. Humans love to exist in areas of grey. Dozens of electrical impulses disconnect in the brain every minute. Nothing lasts forever, not even oneself. There's not anything particularly worthy of disdain. There's not even anything remarkably worthy being called taboo. What escaped her lips now was rage. Bewilderment from the red silhouette. The girl let out an inaudible scream. The true magic would truly be her savior. What an opportunistic load of bull. After all, to begin with. Indeed, Aoko was still in the dark when it came to that magic, whatever it was. He worked from a momentary hallucination. The very illusion of her breaking soul had shown her. Fighting had had the opposite effect on her. Her pride was now ablaze. Killjoy was right. Her opponent had put her in check, but she had done the same to it. It was clear why she was losing, so now all she needed was a counterplan for her abilities. No matter the odds, she was not one to give up without giving it one last shot. Her numbed fingers clenched into a tight fist. She was betting against the house, an unreasonable gamble that should have made her question her sanity. If her first step was off by an inch, her body would be instantly vaporized. But she knew a boy who had never fled. She knew of a steadfast courage that could shine its light, no matter how small, through any desperate situation. Yes, there was more than just herself to be concerned about. If that ice fell, it would mean the destruction of the park in its entirety. Everything he had achieved, everything he had risked and dared and happily put his life on the line for, will be for naught. Determination and confidence surged through her like electricity. She was in no mood to be crushed by a giant sheet of ice. If she was going to lose, she'd rather do so as the grandest firework possible. Because a sore loser, at this point she would rather burn herself to cinders than let it decide her end. She grunted in pain. Energy raged through her body. Her circuits were on the verge of disintegration. Inscribed upon her body, a magic crest was Magecraft given physical form. It did not, however, stop with simply skin and flesh. It burrowed to the very marrow of her bones. A playful smile graced her lips. Her sense of reason had been turned upside down by the pain. That was only natural. He had to praise her own body for holding out for so long, while pushed beyond its limits. Skullface noticed the abnormality. It finally recognized the challenge for dominance over the space. It laughed at the conceit it faced. Yet did it expect a magician to challenge the great flat snark of vessels over a millennium, and in such an age of decline. She tried to catch her breath. She braced herself for the oncoming pain. She was going to smash that ice to pieces. It had access to the same amount of magical energy. That was greatly outmatched, but...
出力装置に差があった。魔力の吸引、方針の規模で負けているのなら、単純な話、私をでかくするだけでいい。チェンジ、 ツアープラン。
Feedback would go beyond anything she had experienced today. Quite simply, her decision went beyond recklessness. She expanded both formulae to maximum size. The first layer would transform into a giant vortex, blowing up the mist. The second layer would process it from one end and pump it into the barrel.
私の想定が甘かった。撃ち落とすなんて半端もいいとこ。この場合、跡形もなく打ち砕くった。
An evil power answered the spellcaster's conviction. It formed the pattern of a writhing serpent. Voiceless magical power flew into a banner of revolution. Look upon the earth, O venerable one. Be now this pioneer, this first among trailblazers. She embodies a species that knows no fear, that renders naught all manner of mystic and tradition.
貸し借りはここまでよ。嘘つきブーちゃん。お望み通り、年をつけて返してあげる。
But the newest magician commands the principles of consumption and extinction. Aberrant bullet of light melted through the castle of ice. The barrel held fast. The control of magical energy was divine. 100,000 miles of veins, equal to 2.5 times the circumference of the earth, hungrily drank in the magical energy. The subsequent magical strike hurtled straight up at the moon. Death rose from the moon's surface. A cry of indignant terror echoed through the abandoned park. Reality was burned into the eyes of this creature of fantasy. To Aoko, its vain struggle was a taste of victory. Victory despite her absolute reckless use of magical energy. The energy scales had been tipped to their breaking point, nevertheless in her
ツ
favor.
アープラン。ブラックライトスターボー。一気に。
So they skipped the line. Sounds like effects of hay fever to me. Scatter, 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 scatter. The skyscraper scattered into atomized dust. The island, it's unattainably extolled, had swallowed whole the despair of its many challenges. It proudly eluded mankind's intellect. Now azure mist bemoaned its demise. In the sky, the icy canopy crumbled. A snark-hunting bullet jumped over the moon. Its throes of death sounded like a roaring sea, reverberating across this fairy tale land. The battle was over. The thick fog dissipated, and the shattered ice melted away before it hit the ground. A lethal bullet unseated the Night King from its throne, affording him no time to grieve his loss. The oil of the moon, the untouched, flat snark. This dreamscape that had begun with its resurrection ended with its demise, drawing a close to the nightmare.
Ugh. さすがに無茶だ。
Flat on her back, Aoko looked up at the night sky. She lay there perfectly still, not able to move a single finger. When she tried, her whole body screamed out in agony. which is completely empty of magical energy, and her magic crest had come to a halt. She estimated that it would likely require a whole day to recover all her body functions. Just one day? Damn. Sadly, all she could really do in that moment was take a breath. At least her chest was swelling with pride. She had gone toe-to-toe with a fairy tale monster, and emerged victorious. The battlefield conditions had failed her, and it was true. But there was no denying that Aoko had come a long way in the last 6 months.
それはそれとしてアリスには謝っとかないと。プロイって壊したらそれっきりだものね。
Oh damn, oh it's gone, ah shit, okay, let's can't use it anymore. Go up, this isn't even my final form moments. That snark would never again return to the sword. It was an insanely rare item, so invaluable that it would have been impossible to price it for an auction at the Association in London. Aoko sent Alice's priceless treasure to oblivion. Needless to say, things had gotten more than a little out of hand.
まあ
They had both agreed to the fight, so Alice probably would not complain. Even if she was furious, she would never be so undignified as to show it. Second Aoko relaxed, her fatigue finally caught up with her. She did everything in her power to fight off the overwhelming drowsiness. Aside from a few minor internal injuries, her body was miraculously unscathed. She felt like she could probably stand up and dust herself off after a bit of rest. The golden moon continued to burn in the night sky.
正体は油だものね。そりゃいつまでも燃え。
It's only because still alive, right? Aoko's bleary eyes went wide in astonishment. She was still unable to lift a finger.
スナークを見つけたベイカーも最後は一緒に消えるんだっけ。
Oh. Parting shot. That's what it is. She sighed in resignation. Aoko accepted that her final stand left her with only 10 seconds before she burned to ash too. Elsewhere, just a short moment prior. Buffeted by a strong winds atop the roller coaster, Soldier gravely peered down at the ground.
Mumu?
All he could muster was a single murmur. He could see Aoko on top of some drawing on the ground and...
なんだあれ。い
the distance. There was something familiar in the direction of the ruined House of Mirrors. Soldier's job, to throw Aoko's hair from a great height, was complete. While not the most impressive of tasks, it was absolutely a matter of life or death. And to top it all off, just thinking about how he was going to get back down to the ground was making him dizzy. He had experienced more than enough trouble for one day.
いや、でも
He was flustered as he stood atop the swing bridge. A skull suddenly appeared in the sky above. On the ground, you could see a circling blue light with Aoko Ozaki in the middle of it. And one more thing. From an angle that only Sojiro could see, a shadow stalked Aoko while she challenged the moon. It was shaped like a person missing the lower half of its body. The puppet's back! The disembodied torso slowly clawed its way towards Aoko. They were still over 600 feet apart. Fortunately for Aoko, she completely failed to notice it approaching from behind.
遠くて見えないけど、あれは
It was sure of what it was now. There was only one thing in the park that would chase Aoko, and not him. The puppet.
いや、でも、ほら、あるいは、ひょっとして、ただの偶然ではないだろうか。
His mind ran in circles. It was a perfectly reasonable reaction. Any grip on reality he might have had left was long lost when Aoko started firing beams of light at the monstrous moon. Aoko's merciless fire buffeted the roller coaster like a storm. Just standing on it was almost enough for him to be thrown off and killed. At any rate, Sojiro couldn't fathom the situation. Could he head back to the entrance of the roller coaster and warn Aoko about the incoming threat? No. There's no way he would make it in time. And to make matters worse, there was a hoard of bread down there waiting for him. It may very well have been the case that Aoko was already aware of the puppet and would take it out as soon as it got closer. If she was Sojiro, Sojiro was sure he would only be in the way. It did not seem like there was anything he could do to help. Beyond that, Aoko was not the only one in danger. He was in quite a predicament himself. He can't go home again. The road home was never as safe as one thought. It was as true here as it had been in the mountains. The path he was on was no exception. As risky as the ascent had been, it was even more dangerous to go back down. This was no time to be worrying about others. His shaking legs reminded him that only 200 feet separated him from death. His head was pounding. This was reckless and stupid. Having been raised in the mountains, he was more sensitive to danger than anyone raised in the city. And just thinking about what he was about to do made his throat seize up. There was only one thing he could say for sure. With a sobbing shout, Sojiro started making his way down the 200-foot frame of the roller coaster. He's running? Shit, man, you got crazy balance. His race towards death accelerated. He never meant to speed up, but the downward slope propelled him forward. Too late for regrets. Now that he was running, he had no choice but to go even faster. Time was not on his side. They would never make it in time if he took the long way down. Never mind the bread men parading the exit of the roller coaster. The exit blocked. The outcome would be the same whether he went slowly or quickly. There was no reason to rush to his death, as desperately as he did. But what if it was futile? Sojiro cleared the doubts from his mind. He turned his attention to what he could do, keeping his footing to try and arrive at the bottom as quickly as he could. He had no idea what impulses were driving his stiff limbs. He just focused on the moment, pushing past the fear and the cold logic. At his core, he was the kind of person to deal with his problems head on. There would be time to think about the consequences later. His hesitation was not his only obstacle. The worst possible hindrance appeared at a time when not focusing on the track would mean certain death. Sojiro sensed something wrong with the egg he had been so studiously observing out of one eye. Something had changed. And at that very moment he realized it. Sojiro stumbled, then instinctively caught himself. It's a miracle he had not fallen. Descending a roller coaster on foot was an act of suicide. The egg stayed right by his side, so close it was likely it would collide with him. Though he was trying not to look at it, he could not help but feel uneasy that the door-like decoration in the center was gradually opening. He cursed his rotten situation, and yet he refused to slow down. He ran even faster, glaring at the egg on his side. Sojiro was baffled to find that he was smiling. Perhaps it has something to do with Aoko's charm. Sojiro could not tell one way or another. He could still feel Aoko's fingers on his skin. The trust and expectation she had placed in him was etched into his heart. But what spurred him on was something entirely different. This all stemmed from a much deeper problem. There was something inside him that he could not understand at the time. He would eventually come to terms with one day. Carefully judged the distance as he ran down the track of death. The distance between what? saying. It was the distance between himself and the one thing that could save his life. He told himself he was going to do it, over and over, like a mantra. Roger could not believe himself. What he was about to do was incredibly stupid. But it's stupid when smart is not an option.
本当なんでそこまでやるんだ
That's a quote. Amidst it all, he laughed at how pointless his self-reflection was now. Temporary confusion, pathological thrill-eyed, both had laid his soul bare. What he mattered in life? The answer to that question was simple. His primitive values did not crave success or reward. All he wanted was
よし
to live the way he wanted. It wasn't an obligation to the people around him. His desire to live his way was his and his alone.
行こう
If the egg had been equipped with a vocal function, it would gasp in shock at what happened next. The boy, who had only tried to escape until this point, suddenly shifted his weight. He pointed his feet outward instead of inward. On the edge of one rail, he crouched ever so slightly to maintain momentum and gazed at the floating egg.
やれる距離的に問題はない
Gonna use the egg self-foothold. He soared through the night sky. It's a flight that lasted a mere 1.5 seconds. A cordless bungee jump from 100 feet above ground. His destination. The only thing that would stop his fall. Giant flying egg. He shrieked, this time out of elation, as he desperately clung to the egg's surface. Just earlier, the cold-blooded witch had told him that without fear, the top of the building would feel no different than a balance beam. It's from the same witch that would have been left speechless had she witnessed the spectacle. There was one thing to be fearless, and another to be reckless. What the boy did next would give her a headache in the days to come.
頼むぞ頼む
Clinging to the egg, he shifted his gaze away from it. Felt the rapid descent. Sojo, focusing his half-shut eyes on the ground, picked off the egg once they were a few feet off the ground, then turned back to it, careful to re-establish eye contact. Damn, that's fucking smart! This guy used the egg's power against it. Something so unbelievable to Sojo. The elevator at the department store and the mysterious floating egg were both just moving objects, virtually indistinguishable from one another.
よし割れてない食べ物を粗末にするのは良くないと思う
He landed near the plaza. A shortcut that almost cost him his life had paid off. Sojo took off running the second his feet touched the ground. Up and after Aoko was the only thing in his mind. He paid no mind to the moonlight in the sky. The egg, which was furious about being used, and seconds away from self-destructing and blasting fragments all over the place.
青崎
His dumbfounded expression spurred Sojo on. The curse was complete. The empty egg began to sing its warning to let them know there was no escape. Shrapnel from the egg exploded through the air. To Queen Alice, Alice had engraved into Dumpty quickly robbed him of his senses.
それはそれとして
He snapped back to the task at hand, ran to Aoko, still lying on the ground. His legs moved as if they had a mind of their own. Couldn't have stopped them anyway, since he could no longer feel them.
お前驚くほどしつこいぞ
Who had escaped by a hair's breadth. I want to eat some bread now too. Fuck. The only person in a position to witness that rare mutual destruction was the girl who had been saved from it. The boy had never stopped running, paid no mind.
死ぬかと思った
The safety of the girl in his arms meant infinitely more to him than the miraculous way in which he saved her. It did not wait for dawn to set. The ornamental texture of the fairy tale kingdom faded away. The illusions returned to the way they were before, from the ostentatious chords reverberating through the streets, to the puppets welcoming their guests. Peace and quiet reigned once more, for a forgotten kingdom, never to be awakened again. Out flickered the embers of a late-night dream, even the electric lamps that illuminated the park. Together, they watched it disappear. Sojiro lay on the ground, desperately, gasping for air like a fish out of water. The curse of the exploding egg had numbed his pain, and he was understandably exhausted after all he had experienced. It looked like he could be blown away by the lightest of breezes. Aoko was also exhausted. She was still in better shape, focused on taking deep, even breaths. She was already working on to recover her strength.
あのさ、
He addressed Sojiro indifferently, so her gaze remained on the amusement park. The abruptness of it was a bit theatrical in nature. She wanted to look at him as she spoke. Pride was simply too great.
あなた、なんかすごいことしなかった？
Remember she had accepted her death, that seemed like an eternity. She was beside herself in shock at how indifferent she had been as the shards rained down from the moon. The reassuring voices snapped her to reality. Why did he do it? What was he thinking? What moronic things had he done to pull it off? He had no answers for these questions. Lying on the ground as she was, what she knew was that he had more than made up for his failure in the House of Mirrors and then some, in those fateful final moments. She addressed him, hoping to find answers, found herself unable to probe any further. To dig any deeper would feel like defeat, which is why it was so unlike her to ask him in the first place. Lucky for her, Sojiro had neither the capacity nor sensitivity to understand how egocentric she was being.
すごいって、それは青崎の方だろ。
Stuttered between labored breaths. It's taking him so much effort just to breathe, that he could not address her properly. She watched him out of the corner of her eye. Thinking back on it, the boy had performed the same role each time. Each and every time he did what he could in spite of his fecklessness. It was far more admirable than her nearly suicidal tactics, even if she did defeat her opponent. He did not even recognize how extraordinary his last act of courage was.
提案、あいつをやっつけるのに協力したら、俺のことは見逃してくれる？
At the very least, he had the courage to keep trying whatever he could. Spectator might have viewed him as a supporting actor. His actions were not exactly memorable. But the lead actress he supported did not see it that way.
まあね、認めたくないし、口になんてもっとしたくないけど。
Such inspired actions are wasted in a supporting role. This guy really pulled off the impossible. So amazing that she wanted to shout it as loud as she possibly could for all to hear.
青崎？
ほんと、人畜無害にどうすぎると侮れないわ。
Kokudu was sighed. How could she not? Even she was forced to admit that the way he'd snatched her from the jaws of death was dashing.
評価、甘めだけど。
Truth be told, he was a lunatic for doing what he did. She steadied her breathing and composed herself. She was in bad shape. She still had her pride as a mage to consider. That's why she felt a need to maintain an air of dignity.
しずきくん、見逃すのは今日だけって話だったけど、あれ、なしでいいわ。とりあえず、命は助けてあげるから。
He hastily extended her right hand. It was either to shake his or to help him up. Sojiro did not take her hand, but instead stood up on his own. This night, despite the sheer insanity that he had just experienced, his face had not once looked as incredulous as it did now.
何よそのリアクションは。
She stammered, worried that she had deeply embarrassed herself. Sojiro's gaze was fixed upon Aoko. Problem had dawned on Aoko. Though she normally hated being stared at, this time she did not mind. She was enjoying the warmth in his eyes, and felt like it was something she could almost come to appreciate. Don't you get it? This isn't just about friendship. It didn't mean he only liked you either. Believe me when I say that, Soroji. Flashback. The conversation came rushing back. It was a memory better left forgotten.
いかん、それは違う。
Pushing Tomura's words out of her mind, Aoko turned to Sojiro.
それとこれは別だから。私はあんたのこととか、ほんとどうでもいいんだから。
Sojiro tilted his head,
さっき嫌いだって言われたけど、
responded matter-of-factly to her sudden declaration. He certainly had pointed that out, and to his face no less. It had a mere figure of speech that he was not meant to take literally. But now it's not the time to belabor the point.
そうじゃなくて、あなたが私に惚れてても期待しないでって言ってるの。
Yet, belabor she did anyway. Aoko blushed slightly, realizing how inane she was being. She wondered how she had ended up in this position. And yet she knew that she had to get this off her chest. All that was left was to politely wait for his response. Can't date you. Such heartbreakingly painful words were too much for the simple boy to hear. His shoulders slumped as if the world was coming to an end. So Aoko had imagined. On the contrary, Sojiro was sitting there in deep thought.
俺が青崎に惚れてるって？
Sojiro murmured the words as if they were a magic spell. She shot right back with the affirmative. There was a moment of deep contemplation. The boy turned to the expectant girl and said,
なんで？
I knew it! I knew it! He had to be joking, but he was not. That's completely serious. He liked her, but he didn't like her. Of course the vice president had jumped to conclusions. This boy had no interest in romance. Oh, he didn't even know what that was. He was incredibly embarrassed by how confused Sojiro still appeared to be. The rosy complexion spread throughout her entire body.
もう一度聞くけど、なんで？
そりゃこっちが聞きたいわよ。飛び丸の大バカ野郎。
Just like that, she had lost her cool and given in to unjustifiable outbursts. It was time to seal off the area and destroy all evidence. Aoko's embarrassment devolved into sheer panic. A grudge against Tomimaru suddenly manifested as criminal assault. Oh, Tomimaru's in for it! She lashed out with a punch that could have taken down a bird mid-flight. Specifically, it was a brutal right hook. Hey, First Steelhead, what's up? How you doing? Aoko blinked. A blow connected with something solid, snapping her out of her reverie. It's Thursday. Yeah, because I got nothing to do with Darkness today, so I was like, I just want to play some Mahoyo. Yeah. There's a lot of, I think these games are going to go on for quite long as well, so I wanted to like get through as much as I can. The Emperor lashed out at the completely defenseless Sojiro. It had been a splendid blow with all her weight behind it, knocking him out cold. Sojiro groaned, crumpling to the ground. Punch finished the job that the curse had started. If not for the discomfort on his face, he appeared almost to be sleeping. He convinced herself that he was napping, concussed.
予定通りになったものね。
The tension in her shoulders eased away as she looked down at Sojiro. A ton had gotten in her way over the course today, but the day was saved, for now. With nobody left to butt heads, she felt exhaustion finally overtake her.
うわ、歩いて帰れるかな、私。
Fatigue was enough to make her complain out loud. As she thought about it, she realized that this was the first time she had used up all her magical energy, and the first time she had participated in a battle of this scale without any prior preparation. The truth.
私一人じゃどっちも相打ちだったっけ。
She felt somewhat proud as she whispered those words. Normally it was something that she would beat herself up over. Instead, she simply shrugged off her shoulders with a bitter smile. After all, it was thanks to the person sleeping by her side.
ね、聞こえてないわよね。
As if the night had swallowed her voice before it reached him, she received no response. Confident, she continued in an even quieter voice.
その、ありがとう。十分に助けてもらったわ。
Of course, there was no response from Sojiro. She was not expecting one. Staying it for the record was enough. Aoko watched Sojiro sleep for a while, then pulled something out of her pocket. It was the palm-sized glass bottle her roommate had given her, which she opened with a pop.
それとこれとは別だから。
Leaving behind words colder than a winter chill at night, he called out his name. He barely sensed the bottle moving. As the silhouette of the fallen boy appeared to blur, she got the feeling that the weight of the bottle increased slightly.
うわ、どうなってんだろうこれ。
What appeared to be a human form could clearly be seen inside the glass. Alice Koenji's tools were mystics that confounded even the most knowledgeable of mages. As soon as Aoko tried to analyze them with logical reason, she was already out of her depth. It's all too well, Aoko closed the bottle and watched the boy disappear, as if by some magic trick.
まったく、こんなの手品じゃなくて魔法だって。
He muttered as she looked into the magical bottle. Its weight had not changed significantly, and she had no idea how it worked. One thing she did know was that there was a human being inside of it. Its light weight was almost unnerving. Closer to empty air than a human being. It was about as heavy as one would expect if they'd bottled a summer breeze. But that did fit her image of Sojiro perfectly.
アリスの言う通り。
He muttered to no one in particular, as she recalled the past.
ほんと、私らしくない。
Cole wore a bittersweet smile. Angel moodiness was gone. It was a dangerous world out there. It's good to have someone to keep her on her toes. With a wry chuckle, she flicked the magical bottle with a finger and set off walking. You could hear a bell in the distance, signaling the end of the play. An ephemeral dream gave way to reality. In the grand scheme of things, it had been but an instant. As the actors exited the stage left, the blast of lights silently flickered out. And so the long-dead amusement park played its final role as a memory for a boy and a girl. That was nice. I like that. Like a dog. Okay. Chapter is this though? Let's say. I think what number this is. I feel like I want to stop here. This is a good time to stop. It's probably going to take me another 3 hours to clear the next episode, so I'm probably going to, yeah. All here for today. Worth it. That was good. That was good. Ah, great episode. Great episode. That was great. We'll continue this on Saturday. If you want to join for that, feel free to. Thanks for joining. Max, that's still in. Ipan. Anyone else has to be here. But yeah, let's get back to this on Saturday. I don't want to start awkwardly and then like finish it awkwardly. So we'll complete episodes in their entirety.